So, you're back for round 2. To preface, I'd like to thank each and every one of you once more for the success of the first Disturbing Songs Iceberg. The support still feels overwhelming today, and thanks to all of you making your voices heard, the sequel to the most acclaimed video on this channel has arrived. For those who are new, this iceberg solely consists of music that horrifies you, that leaves a deep pit of despair in your stomach, that unveils the darkest and most appalling aspects of humanity through harrowing performances, spine-chilling production, and vile context. We've already been through one wave of disturbing music, but trust me, we haven't even scratched the surface. From some of the most infamous tracks ever created, to the enigmatic yet petrifying music hidden away in the furthest corners of the world. This is the second part to the iceberg of the most disturbing songs ever made. Just before we begin, I want to lay out a few ground rules, if you will, for this video. I've heard the feedback from the first part, and with this sequel, I'm aiming to satisfy as many of you as I possibly can. First and foremost, there will be no repeat entries from the last video. Every single song on this iceberg is entirely new and has not been covered by me up to this point, as I'm hoping to introduce even more music to anyone unfamiliar. Second, I understand some were confused about what made a song disturbing. To clarify, each entry is featured based on all aspects of its creation. So, I won't only include a song because it has disturbing production, and I won't only include a song because it has disturbing songwriting. The best of the best fuse all of the above to make for a truly immersive and horrifying experience. Finally, I know some were disappointed by the exclusion of a handful of tracks last time, but it won't happen again. In this video, I'm covering all entries. Nothing's being left out, nothing's being put aside. This will mean I won't go as in-depth, however. So I encourage you to further explore any entries you're interested in on your own. Consider this video more of an introduction. Now, without further ado, let's resume. Michael Jackson's Thriller is about as tame and mainstream as a disturbing song can get, but its foreboding lyricism and strong connection to Halloween are just enough for it to be at the tip of the iceberg. Released on November 30th, 1982 as a single and title track to Thriller by MJ, the certified diamond disco hit aims to evoke all the thrills in the listener through classic horror imagery, lingering synthesizers, and even a chilling spoken word piece from famed actor Vincent Price. Equally as iconic is Thriller's accompanying music video, a short film which features scenes of an undead MJ dancing with other zombies, and Jackson enticing his oblivious girlfriend as a human werewolf, all while paying homage to some of the most classic B-movie horror films. Muse's Isolated System, released as the closer to the English rock band's 2012 album, The Second Law, is notable for being one of the outfit's most experimental works. Continuing from the previous track, Unsustainable, Isolated System is an instrumental piece featuring a somber piano melody and a multitude of radio transmissions and TV broadcasts. The miscellaneous samples randomly speak on various economic and socio-political dilemmas in our world, while the line, "In an isolated system, the entropy can only increase," is repeated. This repetition emphasizes a point on how humanity's wasteful and excessive attitude towards energy use will have detrimental future consequences if it continues to escalate, and in the end, our chaotic lifestyle could lead to our own demise, as portrayed by the song's final 20 seconds of silence after minutes of commotion. Whether it's the eerily raw ukulele instrumentation, high-pitched falsetto delivery, or the total mismatch of both combined, something about this track has given listeners the creeps for decades. Tiptoe Through the Tulips With Me was released by American ukulele player Tiny Tim on April 1st, 1968, as a rendition of the original 1929 version sung by Nick Lucas. With gleeful songwriting and memorable singing, Tiptoe became a standout hit in Tiny Tim's discography, peaking at number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100 and remaining a fan favorite throughout his career. In recent times, however, Tiptoe has developed something of a cursed reputation for its frequent use as a theme in various horror media, notably in several films from the iconic horror franchise Insidious. Tiptoe was also the very last song Tiny Tim performed before he suffered a heart attack on stage and passed away shortly thereafter on November 30th, 1996 at 64. Pokemon and internet horror enthusiasts alike are all too familiar with the Lavender Town theme's uncanny 8-bit melody. Composed by Japanese producer Junichi Masuda, the Lavender Town theme serves as background music for a player's journey into the haunted village from the 1996 video games of Pokemon Red and Blue, a sparse location with a lifeless purple appearance. Lavender Town is associated with death and despair, home to graveyards for hundreds of deceased Pokemon, as well as numerous orphaned Pokemon and wandering spirits. Lavender Town's unsettling ambience is only heightened by its theme, featuring high-pitched atonal notes, and is associated with the infamous Lavender Town Syndrome creepypasta. Spawning in the early 2010s, a widespread urban legend claimed the Lavender Town theme led to an inexplicable spike in among Japanese children who listened to the song in the 1990s, with other reported symptoms including insomnia, brain hemorrhaging, and violent behavior. Of course, this is nothing more than online myth, but a real incident involving the seizure-inducing Dinyo Senshi Porygon episode is believed to have served as the grounding for the Lavender Town creepypasta's spread and the newfound fame for its theme. Ever since its release in 1994, Closer has been the definitive Nine Inch Nails hit. And it makes sense for it to be, seeing as it includes all of Nine Inch Nails' signature elements: bold production, evocative vocals, and deeply personal undertones. The songwriting on Closer is often misinterpreted as lustful or solely pertaining to romantic intimacy. With lines like this, it's virtually unavoidable. But this is far from the track's main focus. Instead, Closer is the anthem of a nihilist, featuring a speaker who spends every moment of their being loathing themselves and doing whatever it takes to break through a profound emotional numbness from within, even if it means resorting to extremely violent or animalistic tendencies. Such self-hatred is a very prevalent theme throughout the entirety of The Downward Spiral, making it a remarkably disturbing yet impactful listen, and something I'd love to discuss more in the future. In Your Eyes by The Weeknd's flashy disco sound might come off as upbeat in tone, but the song's accompanying music video caught many off guard by placing Abel Tesfaye's vulnerable songwriting in a surreal horror setting. The video for the After Hours standout begins with a young couple entering an elevator where an emotionless, knife-wielding Weeknd stands behind them. Suddenly, the video cuts to the same woman from before, now bloodied, and frantically running from a Michael Myers-esque weekend who hunts her in a frenzied game of cat and mouse. Eventually, the woman finds herself in the desolate hallways of a club venue and arms herself with an axe while waiting for the right time to strike the weekend. When he arrives, the woman finally decapitates the weekend and then proceeds to spend the rest of the video enthusiastically dancing with his severed head. Some view the video as being metaphorical of how, in order for the weekend's love interest to truly share the same feelings for him, they would have to share the same intoxicating lifestyle as him. In this case, like embracing a killer mindset. The woman survived being chased by becoming murderous herself and killing the weekend, which could speak to how his lover has to be equally erratic, disturbed, and maybe slightly sociopathic to find any true romantic appeal in him. Let's all be real. We all remember the very first time we listened to this disc on a jukebox and ended up being horrified by Minecraft of all games. C418's 11 is memorable for being unlike almost every other disc in Minecraft. There is no melody, but a brief, incredibly uncanny recording which leaves the listener with more questions than answers. The disc begins with vinyl static, then the sounds of someone traversing through an underground mine. Eerie cave noises are faintly heard. Flint and steel are seemingly used as a light source, and for unknown reasons, a sudden sense of urgency overwhelms this person. The sounds of footsteps grow from a walking to running pace, while the background noises turn manic, and a loud, distorted noise is suddenly heard before the disc abruptly ends at exactly 1 minute and 11 seconds. The Minecraft community has spent over a decade interpolating the events of the disc, and specifically what entity led to its sudden finish. Some believe it to be the infamous Herobrine. Others assume it was an Enderman, but several researchers believe Disc 11 depicted an explorer's unfortunate encounter with a creeper, hence the disc's fragmented appearance resulting from the mob's explosion. Composed by Bernard Herrmann, the main theme for Alfred Hitchcock's esteemed 1960 horror classic Psycho is a 7-minute magnum opus of tension and anxiety. Hitchcock has famously stated at least, quote, 33% of the effect of Psycho was due to the music, end quote. And Herrmann's score undoubtedly adds a much-needed layer of suspense, making Psycho's viewing experience as memorable as it is. The film's main theme in particular is marked by unnerving strings and erratic tempo changes throughout, often moving from serene for one moment to maniacal in the next. Herrmann manages to encapsulate nervousness in ways few scores could ever conceive of doing so, and it's being coupled with Hitchcock's masterful directing truly elevates Psycho to legendary status. Varg Vikernes' Dunkelheit, a quintessential black metal record released in 1996, is not only notorious because of the man behind the song, but for its sensational lyricism and utterly menacing riffs throughout. Initially the first track Vikernes ever recorded in 1991, Dunkelheit, German for darkness, consists of grainy sound quality, signature amongst early black metal music, and is played in the key of E minor with instrumentation amplified by the song's harsh style. Lyrically, Vikernes taps into a contemplation of darkness, establishing a grim yet supernatural atmosphere where this dark force is personified and consumes the natural world. Of course, Vikernes himself has lived quite an infamous life. He has been the perpetrator behind a series of church arsons in Norway, and received Norway's maximum penalty of 21 years in prison for murdering one of his contemporaries, Euronymous, in 1993. It was during this sentence when Dunkelheit was released, further heightening the song's disturbing context, and cementing Vikernes and his story in black metal history. A standout from the Velvet Underground and Nico's 1967 collaborative album, Venus in Furs is directly based on Austrian writer Leopold von Sacher-Masoch's 1870 novella of the same name. Sacher-Masoch's story follows a man named Severin and his infatuation with a woman named Wanda, an obsession so extreme he believes enslaving himself to her will cure his heart, and worships the ground she walks on. In the novella, Wanda plays into Severin's submission, who compares her to Venus, the Roman goddess of love, and accepts her role as a mistress, with frontman Lou Reed providing imagery associated with masochism and domination in the track. Not only were Sacher-Masoch's themes of masochism almost unheard of when his novella was first published. I mean, masochism is literally derived from his name, but the Velvet Underground's track challenged many lyrical conventions of the 60s as well, especially with songwriting as vivid and unrestrained as Reed's. Music Disc 13 is yet another composition by C418 intended for Minecraft. Similar to 11, 13 is an ominous, cave-themed ambient piece, and is commonly found in underground structures such as monster rooms or ancient cities. Heavily reverberated synths echo throughout the track, while numerous miscellaneous cave noises, as well as a skeleton's bow firing and a creeper hissing and exploding, can also be heard at certain points. It is universally believed discs 11 and 13 are different pieces of the same cave recording, as this theory has been backed in a video by the Game Theorists, where it is pointed out how 11 begins during a brief pause in 13, and then 13 resumes when 11 ends, with the full recording being a total of 4 minutes and 9 seconds long. The disc's number is also a reference to each of the 13 cave ambience sounds which were present when it was first added in 2011. Maybe the most recognizable score in all of cinema, the main title theme for Jaws, composed by the renowned John Williams, is not only single-handedly responsible for adding an extra layer of suspense to Steven Spielberg's 1975 classic thriller, but also for realizing a theme for one of the most fearsome predators on the planet. The theme's iconic ostinato, alternating between E and F, is symbolic of a shark preying upon an unsuspecting victim, with Williams noting the piece's simplicity as brainless like the shark, yet instinctual, relentless, and unstoppable. Ever since its release, Jaws' theme has long been associated with the sense of impending doom. Its simple yet blood-pumping motif, creating adrenaline in the listener as the score works in tandem with scenes of a terrifying great white shark attacking its prey. Released in 2004, Mind Tale tells the real-world story of the gruesome interactions between two German cannibals who met online. In 2001, a man named Armin Maiwes, known by his online alias of the Master Butcher, posted a series of advertisements on early forum sites such as Nulo and the Cannibal Cafe, seeking a well-built man to be cannibalized. While countless users disregarded or made a mockery out of Maiwes' ads, one 43-year-old man named Bernd Brandes agreed to be a voluntary victim, and the two arranged a meeting at Maiwes' home on March 9th, 2001. There, Maiwes and Brandes carried out their planned slaughter, with Maiwes cutting off Brandes' penis and eating it together, a process vividly depicted in Mind Tale's lyrics. Then, with his consent, Maiwes murdered Brandes and feasted on his remains over the course of 10 months, until his arrest in December of 2002. Maiwes has since been sentenced to life in prison, and, ironically, has become a vegetarian while in jail. In regards to Mind Hill's appalling subject matter, Rammstein frontman Till Lindemann has stated, "It is so sick that it becomes fascinating and there just has to be a song about it." Credits song For My Deaf is an 8-bit instrumental track released by a producer who I'll call Vi for short in 2021. The instrumental symbolism of accepting death is quite self-explanatory and has a very bittersweet sound to its melody, a feeling Vi may also hold towards death itself. Since its release, Credits song For My Deaf has resonated with millions of listeners, who have found ways to connect its tragic tone with personal events occurring in their own lives. Dead Skin Mask, a standout from thrash legends Slayer's 1990 release Seasons in the Abyss, is one of the band's most contextually disturbing works, as its lyrics speak from the perspective of American murderer and body snatcher Ed Gein. Lines such as, "The brush of the dead, cold flesh appease the means," allude to Gain's vile habit of removing corpses from burial sites and fashioning keepsakes from their skin, something also clearly referenced in the song's title. The track has a very sadistic narrative tone overall, with verses depicting a psyche overtaken by demonic forces and an infatuation with the macabre. Dead Skin Mask takes an especially grim turn in the final chorus, where the voice of a young victim is heard begging to be freed from Gain's captivity. Liberator of Minds is an instrumental piece composed by the British-Australian collective Dead Can Dance, and featured on their 2018 album Dionysus. The 5-minute track consists of a mesmerizing soundscape with predominantly West Asian mantras, vocals from member Brendan Perry, and tribal instrumentation. Its lingering archaic melodies making for an elegiac yet meditative listening experience. To put it simply, A Little Piece of Heaven by metal band Avenged Sevenfold is an absolute fevered nightmare of a track. The song, released in 2007 as the 9th track of Avenged Sevenfold's self-titled record, was realized in a dream had by late drummer James "The Rev" Sullivan, who immediately started writing lyrics upon awakening to immortalize its ghastly storyline. As the track goes, a man who is deeply in love with his girlfriend becomes so overwhelmed by the fear of losing her, he brutally stabs her to death to eliminate the possibility. The man wickedly justifies the act and describes the murder in detail, later cannibalizing and his girlfriend's corpse. In a bizarre twist, the girl's soul emerges from the dead and proceeds to murder the man by ripping his heart out and eating it. In the afterlife, the man begs for the girl's forgiveness and asks for a chance to renew their relationship as bloodthirsty demons. Ultimately, the girl agrees, and the couple become married in death and spend the rest of eternity slaughtering mankind. Yeah, moving on. The iconic Deftones hit, My Own Summer Shove It, spawned out of Chino Marino's disdain for sunlight. In the past, the frontman has recalled spending his nights recording in the studio, and when he would try to rest during the day, the sun prevented him from ever falling asleep. Not only has the sun been an obstacle to Marino's sleep schedule, but it has also agitated him whilst touring, largely thanks to extreme summer heat and the already aggravating crowds of screaming concertgoers. This displeasure has led Marino to develop an apocalyptic fantasy where crowds in the street have vanished and the sun is wiped off the horizon, aptly labeling it his own summer in this benchmark nu metal track. Organ Squared /ASLSP, or As Slow as Possible, is a piece composed by the late American composer John Cage in 1987 for the organ, an adaptation of his original 1985 version for the piano. As the title suggests, Cage's instruction for the song state for no two performances to be the same, and for it to be played as slow as possible. And by slow, he meant literal decades and potentially centuries long slow. These performances tend to last for days or months. But one within St. Burchardi Church in Halberstadt, Germany, has been ongoing for nearly 25 years and is intended to continue until 2640, said to represent the 639 years between the first recorded permanent organ installation in the cathedral in 1361 and the initial proposed starting date of 2000. Because pipe organs are capable of sounding indefinitely, ASLSP's unorthodox notes are able to linger for a life's worth of time and longer, a truly bewildering piece. A march, officially titled Marching, comes from the Russian electronic duo of Anastasia Kreslina and Nikolai Koslyev off their 2020 release, Goodbye, and provides poignant commentary on the repressive psychological tactics of the Soviet Union and how such methods are still utilized in modern Russian society. Marching songwriting, as well as its equally essential music video, details the reality of living under a highly domineering Russian government, where totalitarianism reigns supreme. Dogmatism is encouraged in all demographics, and the youth are forced into a system of division and exploitation. Perhaps most harrowing are lyrics written from the perspective of a child separated from their family and forced to endure the horrors of war, highlighting how Russian child soldiers of the past and present have followed orders to execute by compulsion just because of how ingrained it was in their minds, even if they may have been at war with people of sound hearts. Released in 1993, Prison Sex by Tool serves as an incredibly discomforting examination of the cycle of abuse and the psychological effects of the resulting trauma on their future. The songwriting shifts between the perspective of both a victim and an abuser, with a victim first acknowledging the loss of their purity and the long-term impact of their childhood trauma, and then completing their transformation into an abuser themselves, relieving themselves of their own inner pain by inflicting it on another victim. As stated in the line, "Do unto you now what has been done to me." Prison Sex's music video provides an equally morbid depiction of these same themes of child abuse through uncanny stop-motion visuals. The video, showcasing the aforementioned grim cycle of retribution triggered by molestation, has been hailed by critics and fans alike for its vulnerable symbolism and creativity, but was also pulled from MTV's TV rotation upon its release, due to its explicit content. De Futura is a 17-minute track released by French progressive rock band Magma in 1976. Composed by the band's bassist Yannick Top, De Futura's original title was De Futura Hiroshima and is dedicated to the victims of the atomic bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima in August of 1945. Its menacing bass grooves encapsulating the feeling of the local population as bomb alarms sounded and a sense of Armageddon took over. The track is notable for standing as a precursor to much heavier, louder, and more aggressive rhythms and movements heard in genres such as death metal, and for being a landmark in the Zool genre, a hybrid of jazz fusion and symphonic rock, which was invented by Magma and utilizes a fictional language called Cobain, created by frontman Christian Vander. De Futura has also since been sampled by the experimental hip-hop group Def Grips in the song Known for It from their debut mixtape, Ex-Military. Nightmare Host is a chilling 3-minute instrumental piece composed by American composer Michael Wanmacher for the soundtrack to the 2015 video game Bloodborne. The song ultimately serves as a score to the player's boss battle against Mikolash, host of the Nightmare. 742617000027 is the short yet enigmatic opener to Slipknot's 1999 self-titled album. The track contains nothing more than distorted static, what could possibly be high-pitched screams, and a repeated sample of the line, "The whole thing, I think it's sick." This line was taken during an interview with Corey Hurst, a former cellmate of the Manson family member Susan Atkins, for the 1993 documentary Manson, detailing her thoughts on the cult's depraved motives. The song's numerical title was the shipping number for Slipknot's self-distributed debut project, Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat. One band members have also worn on their jumpsuits in past concerts. 74261 ultimately serves as an instrumental link to Slipknot's second track, which is fittingly titled Sick. Tubular Bells refers to the debut album by English multi-instrumentalist Mike Oldfield, released in 1973. At just 19 years old, Oldfield wrote and recorded nearly all of the music on the project, which includes instrumentals such as the guitar, piano, organ, actual tubular bells, and even miscellaneous tools such as a claw hammer. Tubular Bells is divided into 2 instrumental tracks, over 23 minutes in length apiece, and includes a particularly disconcerting moment in its second part, where shouting vocals from Oldfield are heard. The yelling came as a result of business magnate Richard Branson ordering Oldfield to include vocals on one of his songs, so it could be released as a single, despite conflicting with Oldfield's creative wishes. So, in a form of protest, Oldfield drank half a bottle of Jameson's whiskey and screamed at the top of his lungs in a recording booth for 10 minutes while intoxicated, including his vocals in the back end of his project. Despite its left-field style, Tubular Bells went on to sell roughly 15 million copies worldwide, largely thanks to portions of its opener being included in the horror classic The Exorcist, and is widely regarded as an essential instrumental rock record. Fantasy, a song written and produced by French musician Die, makes it onto this iceberg for its infamously graphic animated music video, first uploaded on October 19th, 2011. The video follows 4 teenagers, 2 boys and 2 girls, who sneak into an indoor pool at night. One pair jumps into the pool and gets intimate in the water, while the other sits by the poolside and watches. Feeling slightly awkward, the boy on the poolside attempts to kiss the girl next to him, but she immediately declines and jumps into the pool to leave the situation. The rest of the group is confused when the girl resurfaces in a panicked state, notably experiencing a spasming sensation in her genital region. Then, in a gruesome twist, the girl and the boy learn the other couple has been possessed by parasitic aliens as they burst through their bodies and kill the boy. The girl somehow escapes by jumping back into the pool and entering a portal to another dimension at the bottom. There, she stares at an off-screen entity, and the video ends when she subsequently dies from her eyes violently exploding out of her skull. Strange Fruit, initially written by April Miropol in 1937 and performed by the legendary jazz singer Billie Holiday 2 years later, contains poetic yet sinister lyricism which focuses on hate crimes against African Americans during the Jim Crow era of America, particularly depicting the lynching taking place during this time. Lines such as "Southern trees bear a strange fruit," Blood on the Leaves, and Blood at the Root, detail how the systemic oppression and suffering of African Americans is the root of the prosperity of white supremacists. Strange Fruit utilizes scenes of lynching and fruits hanging from a tree to forward this message. In a post-Civil War South where slavery and systemic racism nominally ended, lynching very much still occurred and re-established a sense of horror within black communities. While the elites of the South were seen as chivalrous on the surface, in later years, Strange Fruit served as a protest anthem against racism, and despite receiving death threats, venue bans, and jail time for her adamancy, Holiday continued performing the song throughout her career and shared its dark yet powerful themes with the world. Another self-explanatory entry. This one refers to the main title theme of the 2007 horror film Dead Silence, composed by American producer Charlie Clouser. I'll be honest, I feel like this kind of music stops getting scary at about 12 years old, but we'll just move on now. This entry refers to Italian chorister Alessandro Moreschi's circa 1904 performance of the piece Ave Maria. Moreschi's singing has been characterized by a certain sobbing in his delivery, this being a rather dated vocal technique, which could also be attributed to Moreschi being a castrato. It is believed at around 1865, Moreschi was castrated before hitting puberty as part of a centuries-old European practice done on vocally gifted boys to retain their soprano voice. Though once tradition, such methods of castration have since received significant moral disapproval for how they violated vulnerable children, and it makes Moreschi's works all the more awkward to experience. In more recent times, Moreschi's version of Ave Maria has received newfound popularity for its prevalent use in the YouTube analog horror series, The Mandela Catalog, one of Danny Brown's most acclaimed singles. The standout from the Detroit rapper's 2016 magnum opus, Atrocity Exhibition, serves as a profound yet twisted snapshot of Brown's psyche during the darkest point of his life. Ain't It Funny's intense production matches the level of discomfort in its lyricism, which speaks on Brown's struggle with substance abuse and his desensitization towards the consequences of his self-destructive behavior. Reflecting on his situation, Brown notes how his journey out of a life of misery has seemingly only led him back to the drug-induced depression he was escaping from, only this time with newfound fame and the spotlight always on him. Brown laughs at his own struggle, in a way he believes not only the public but Satan himself does, and acknowledges there is no way for him to recover without professional intervention. Equally hysterical in nature is Ain't It Funny's music video, directed by Jonah Hill, which further mocks Brown's vices by taking on a sitcom format and depicting a suburban family struggling to deal with his behavior for the entertainment of a live audience. The video ends when Brown violently murders the entire family before being killed by personified substances himself, and a child even shows up to confront the live audience's immorality for finding amusement in the atrocity exhibition of Danny Brown. Of course, this entry refers to the main theme of the 2010 supernatural horror classic Insidious, composed by American producer Joseph Bishara. I have to say, this franchise has quite a lot of eerie music in its movies. Whether it's Bishara's haunting score for the first film, or the moments where Tiptoe has its uncanny appearances, it definitely has a lasting impact if you watch them as an oblivious kid. Dead Bodies Everywhere is the fourth song on Korn's 1998 nu metal classic Follow the Leader, and uses nightmarish imagery of the dead to detail the early conflicts between a young Jonathan Davis and his parents regarding the frontman's future endeavors. Before becoming Korn's lead singer, Davis enrolled in a mortuary school near Bakersfield, California, and became a mortician's apprentice as a teen. As such, Davis spent a considerable amount of his adolescence embalming dead bodies and performing autopsies, though his experience would later serve as source material for tracks such as Dead Bodies Everywhere. Davis expressed a clear disinterest towards the apprenticeship, going as far as to invite his own parents to see his ghastly world of dead bodies for themselves, instead of continuing to pressure him into a career unrelated to music. The Disintegration Loops refers to a series of 4 instrumental albums released between 2002 and 2003 by famed American ambient artist William Basinski, a project Basinski first began in the early 1980s. The instrumental pieces were composed with samples of seconds-long recordings of found sound sources, which were then looped using analog tapes. When Basinski returned to his tapes to digitalize them some 20 years later, he noticed how ferrite fell from the analogs and disintegrated before him, which later encouraged him to continue looping the tapes and capture their disintegration on record with an additional layer of reverb. The recordings were officially completed on September 11th, 2001. During the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City. On this day, Basinski and his friends gathered on the roof of his apartment building and spent the final hours of sunlight watching as smoke rose over Manhattan while the disintegration loops played in the background. Each of the album's covers were from footage of the nearby smoke recorded by Basinski, notably capturing not only the disintegration of sound, but the disintegration of harmony, of security, and of life. Basinski has since dedicated the Disintegration Loop series to the victims of 9/11. Black Paint is the 3rd track featured on Death Grips's 2018 release, Year of the Snitch. Backed by breakneck instrumentation, thunderous drums, and layers of distortion, Black Paint sees MC Ride embracing the darkness in his life, much like how the song Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones depicts a speaker wanting everything around them black to match their mood. One of several Rolling Stones references Death Grips made throughout their rollout for Year of the Snitch. Similar to its inspiration, Black Paint entirely revolves around indulging in miserable, or in this case, satanic urges. And on a more existential note, choosing to face death instead of fear it, and recognizing the ephemerality of life itself. Though only serving as a minute-long intro to Slipknot's 2001 classic Iowa, 515 is widely regarded by the nu metal band's fanbase as one of the group's most harrowing works ever released. The track, named after an area code in Slipknot's home state of Iowa, captures DJ Sid Wilson's immediate reaction to the news of his grandfather passing away due to health complications. Wilson was previously aware of his grandfather's condition and rushed to complete his parts for Iowa so he could visit him, but when he learned it was too late, Wilson asked producer Ross Robinson to be locked inside a recording booth and have his vocals captured during the moment, with the end result leading to his pained screams of anguish and grief, making it onto the record. In regard to the recording, Wilson has stated, "Yeah, that screaming and crying and breaking down that you hear at the beginning of the album, that's me." Obviously it was edited, but if we actually played just the raw recording of it, I don't think many people would be able to stomach it. That's all I've ever known how to do, express myself through music and art. The intention wasn't for it to be used on the album. Everyone in the studio was bawling with me, and I just let it rip. Slipknot's longest song to date is the self-titled track on their 2001 release, Iowa, and it is one of the most disturbing sonic journeys in their entire catalog. Frontman Corey Taylor has famously stated he recorded his vocals while stripped naked, vomiting, and repeatedly cutting himself with glass. And the listener can even hear him doing so at several points in the track. Iowa's depravity is only heightened from a narrative perspective, as it is written entirely within the mindset of a necrophiliac. The song is set right after the speaker has committed his murder, who then talks to an unnamed corpse in an incredibly sadistic and obsessive manner, both professing his love to and degrading his victim, and finally assuring them they will live forever under his possession. This entry refers to the iconic main title theme for the 1978 slasher Essential Halloween, composed by the legendary director himself, John Carpenter. Halloween's theme originated from a bongo exercise Carpenter learned from his father in 1961. The time signature for the exercise was a rather unorthodox 5/4, but because it was simple and the first thing he knew to play, Carpenter transposed this same technique to the piano, after adding in synthesizers, descending 16th note melodies, and motifs which matched the tension felt in Michael Myers' most suspenseful scenes. The centerpiece to Halloween's remarkable soundtrack was realized. Man, if you're a real one and you've played the game, this song has probably been haunting you for years after your first time playing. Sayonara is an instrumental piece composed by Dan Salvato for the visual novel game of Doki Doki Literature Club, standing as a distorted version of the otherwise bright Ohayu Sayori, which plays when, spoiler alert, the player walks into the scene of Sayori's. The track has stuck with fans for being an off-putting score to the death of a beloved character, and its title only adds insult to injury by being a snarky pun on the Japanese word sayonara, or goodbye in English, and Sayori's own name. A delightful tune the protagonist hears when they encounter their first companion is warped into this massively unnerving song made for an equally vile sight, and boy is it scarring. Look at Your Game Girl's notoriety obviously has less to do with its production or contents in general, and more with the fact it was made by maybe the most despicable cult leader in American history. A folk rock demo recorded by Charles Manson in 1968. Look at Your Game Girl sees Manson playing with the conflicted emotions of an unnamed young woman, questioning the authenticity of her feelings, and enthusiastically encouraging her to liberate herself of such confusion. The track undoubtedly contains darker undertones of mind control, as many critics have drawn connections between its songwriting and Manson's real-world methods of manipulating his followers to later commit unspeakable acts as a cult. Since its release, Look at Your Game Girl has been the subject of a very mixed reception, and was most notably covered by Guns N' Roses on their 1993 album, The Spaghetti Incident. Hurricane by German outfit Electric Callboy might have the most extreme mood swing of any song made in recent memory. The first half of this 2-minute track is your typical Schlager song with unassuming melodies and tame pop production, but one beat switch later and Hurricane evolves into a death metal frenzy. This shift is even showcased in the track's music video, where one half shows a boat trip in paradise, and the other shows a bloody zombie apocalypse, wherein the crew from the boat is viciously mauled by the undead. The longest song to be officially released by the Beatles, Revolution 9, featured on their 1968 self-titled album, is one massive 8-minute mishmash of incoherent vocals, speeches, instrumentation, and sound effects such as echoes, stereo panning, and distorted feedback. The sound collage is about as close as you can get to a sonic portrayal of a bad acid trip as possible, where confusion and mayhem overstimulate the listener and doesn't let up for one moment. John Lennon has stated Revolution 9 was his attempt at depicting a revolution using only sound, further influenced by Yoko Ono's avant-garde style and several musique concrète artists such as Stockhausen and Varese. Many have attempted to discern any sort of symbolism within Revolution 9's moments of lyricism, but although a few niche references are made, none of them correlate with each other whatsoever, and the track is simply just 8 minutes of chaos. This is a song with profound levels of symbolism, and I could spend forever discussing the emotional depth in its storytelling, but I'll tell you the fundamentals of the track's meaning. Limousine, a song from rock band Brand New's 2006 release, The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me, is based on the tragic real-world death of 7-year-old Katie Flynn, who served as the flower girl for her aunt's wedding before being killed in a car accident while returning home in a limousine with her family. A drunk driver named Martin Hygen was 3 times over the legal alcohol limit of 0.28 BAC as he drove roughly 2 miles in the opposite lane, ultimately colliding with the limo containing Flynn's family and murdering Katie and the chauffeur Stanley Rabinowitz. Flynn's reported last words were, "Daddy, this is the best day of my life." The song itself is told from several perspectives, including Hygen, who must live with a life's worth of guilt for his sins, Flynn's mother, who mourns her baby girl and makes a strong effort to move forward in life without her, and seemingly Flynn herself, who attempts to comfort her mother by reassuring her she will never physically or mentally suffer in this world again. Fire on High is a song by English rock outfit Electric Light Orchestra, released in 1975 as part of their album Face the Music. Aside from a transcendental instrumental, the track is notable for featuring a series of cryptic lyrics played in reverse. What initially sounds like gibberish actually reads, "The music is reversible, but time is not. Turn back." A year before the release of Fire on High, Electric Light Orchestra were accused of leaving backwards messages, often believed to be ominous or even satanic in nature. In songs such as El Dorado, the band responded by sarcastically playing into the otherwise unfounded reaches, ultimately stating not to waste time searching for what never existed. Spokes for the Wheel of Torment, an instrumental from the enigmatic yet legendary musician Buckethead, was released in 2004 as part of the Cuckoo Clocks of Hell, and is one of the guitarist's few tracks with an accompanying music video. Directed by Sid Guerin and Eric Henry, the video's disturbing visuals were inspired by the triptychs of 15th century Dutch painter Hieronymus Bosch, which are grand artworks divided into 3 carved panels. Spokes for the Wheel of Torment lives up to its unnerving title, as it features a montage of medieval torture, mutilation, and arson, all backed by riveting heavy metal instrumentation from Buckethead. Helmet in the Bush by Korn, featured on their 1994 self-titled debut, speaks on Jonathan Davis's speed addiction and refers to one of the drug's side effects of penis shrinkage in its title, with Davis stating it made his appear as literally a helmet in the bush. On a more emotional note, Davis confesses to using meth as a way to ease his paranoia, but also loses sleep at night because of it, and wishes his friends would help him come clean instead of also being addicted. With seemingly no other way to escape, Davis calls to God to save him from his addiction. And fortunately, he would finally quit his drug use roughly 10 years after the release of Helmet in the Bush. The Song of Unhealing is widely known as the theme to the legendary early creepypasta Ben Drowned. The track itself being a reverse version of Song of Healing from The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, recorded by the creepypasta's author Jaduzable. Within the lore, the Song of Unhealing plays in the background of a cursed version of Majora's Mask, haunted by the vengeful spirit of a boy named Ben, who takes on the form of a nightmarish version of Link and constantly torments the player. For over a decade, the Song of Unhealing has struck discomfort and fear in generations of internet horror fans, which, given its purpose, seemingly makes it an effective song. Starvation is a popular yet eerie 7-minute instrumental from dark ambient producer Repulsive, released in 2022. The song has gained notoriety for being featured in numerous online horror media, most notably back when Mr. Incredible Becoming Uncanny content was popular, if you're chronically alive enough to remember. Data Demon is another dark ambient instrumental released in 2017 by English producer Lapalux, characterized by its profound experimentation and chaotic yet ethereal sound. The song's accompanying video, directed by Marielle Temper, contains visuals which look like something straight out of a sci-fi horror film, and complements Lapalux's unsettling score quite well. Tepper has stated the video's many unique shapes were inspired by the hard-edge paintings of Lorcer Feitelson and aimed for its ambiguous nature to give, quote, the viewer an impulse toward inquiry and, while listening to the album, resolution, end quote. Twisted Abduction is a nearly 7-minute long instrumental composed by the revered American producer Jerry Goldsmith for the soundtrack of the 1982 horror film Poltergeist. The song plays in the scene where Carol Ann is abducted by supernatural forces during a devastating storm. I'll be honest, this is an entry I'm not too sure fits, but I did swear to not leave anything out. Spinning Round is a psychedelic pop song released by French artist Orval Carlos Sibelius in 2013 and featured on his album Super Forma. The 6-minute track contains desolate yet dreamy production and floating vocals from Sibelius. Nothing actually disturbing though, so we'll move on. Another entry from Lapalux, Voltaic Acid is another electronic instrumental featured on his 2019 album Amneoverse. The song has its cold moments, but definitely isn't as unnerving as Data Demon, and even contains soothing vocals and clean breakbeats near its midpoint. This entry refers to the soundtrack for the famed YouTube horror web series Petscope, composed by its creator, Tony Domenico. For those unfamiliar, Petscope follows a protagonist named Paul, who explores what he believes to be a long-lost PlayStation video game, later descending into a surreal journey of mystery, darkness, and real-world horrors. Like its source material, the Petscope soundtrack is inspired by the music and sound effects of retro video games, but is not without occasionally uncanny or even ominous ambience. The tracklist also follows the pace of the series, as its sound evolves from charming to cryptic to cold. Released in 1994, Life Eternal by black metal heavyweights Mayhem contains some of the final lyrics written by the late Dead, the band's former lead vocalist, who committed years before the release of the Mysteries Dom Satanas. The lyricism on this track, its lines permitted in Dead's note, is all the more harrowing given its context, as the verses depict Dead's final thoughts before his untimely death. The frontman expresses his happiness towards the end of his suffering and details his experiences with Cotard's syndrome, the belief one is either already dead or does not exist in the mortal realm. Sarah, featured on American rapper Tyler the Creator's debut 2009 mixtape Bastard, contains what fans consider to be one of the most morbid storylines in his discography, even by his early edgelord standards, and reaches levels of disturbing a la Eminem's Kim. The song follows a speaker who expresses his feelings towards a girl named Sarah, who is based on a real-life high school crush Tyler had named Raquel. However, Raquel never liked Tyler back, and the track's narrator learns Sarah shares similar feelings when she rejects his prom invitation. Out of spite, the speaker then holds Sarah captive by tying her up before murdering her corpse, and cannibalizing her. In Sarah's final moments, the speaker laments the fallout of his obsession and commits upon the arrival of authorities. The closer to post-hardcore band Slint's seminal final album, Spiderland, follows a captain who has lost his entire crew following a devastating storm and must cope with loss and isolation in an emotionally distraught state. Inspired by a similar tale from the poem The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, frontman Brian McMahon somberly delivers lines detailing the captain's regret of leading his crew to their demise, and later his desperate pleas to a boy who reminds him of the carefree, prideful state he was once in, a metaphor which undoubtedly relates to Spiderland's grander theme of the loss of childhood. Good Morning Captain in particular focuses on the gradual yet abrupt transition into adulthood, and the risk McMahon took in pursuing a music career and leaving behind his relatives, despite desperately wishing to cling to childhood simplicity and purity. The song takes a more personal turn in its second half and coda, where McMahon speaks directly to his family and promises to make up for his departure, before fully going off the edge in an intense coda where he repeatedly screams, "I miss you." McMahon has since explained the line was directed at his younger brother, whom he had to leave behind, and hopes he won't have to do the same to his loved ones. The recording process for Good Morning Captain was so emotionally demanding, McMahon reportedly checked himself into a hospital afterwards, after profusely sweating and vomiting. Death Pierce Me is the brutal self-titled opener to Swedish black metal outfit Silencer's 2001 release. Backed by a profoundly intense instrumental, enigmatic frontman Natram speaks of his longing to experience extreme suffering as a violent yet cathartic form of release. This self-harm is reportedly something Natram actually did during the making of Death Pierce Me, as it is believed he cut his wrists and hands during recording sessions to achieve a uniquely tortured vocal style. Natram's disturbing ritual, combined with the obscurity of any and all personal information, has led to him developing something of a cult fanbase in the depressive, suicidal black metal scene, and Death Pierce Me undoubtedly stands out as a menacing cult classic. Mr. Rogers by Korn, featured on the nu metal band's second album Life is Peachy, highlights the loss of childhood innocence as a result of trauma, and sees Jonathan Davis taking out his personal frustrations on the beloved children's media personality Fred Rogers. Davis recalls watching Mr. Rogers' show as a child, and blames him for falsely believing everyone in the world is nice and has friendly intentions, a belief he obviously found to be exaggerated given his experiences with bullying and sexual abuse as a boy. Davis angrily mocks some of the theme music for Mr. Rogers' shows, as well as his past lessons, ultimately emphasizing how life isn't all sunshines and rainbows, and you shouldn't let even the most kind-hearted people say otherwise. Prelude, The Family Trip. is the brief yet disconcerting opener to American rock artist Marilyn Manson's 1994 debut album Portrait of an American Family, co-produced by Manson and Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails. The song serves as a much darker cover of the already ominous A Wondrous Boat Ride from the infamous tunnel scene in the 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. The boat scene stands out as a terrifying interlude in Wonka's tour, as each of the guests is suddenly met with jump scares, flashing colors, and nauseating visuals, while venturing deeper into the unknown. With this prelude, Manson not only wishes to evoke a similar sense of unpredictability within his debut, but to reignite a long-lost childhood fear of the unknown in adults. Released in 1999, What's He Building is an uncanny poem by American singer-songwriter Tom Waits. Backed by a desolate instrumental, Waits delivers lines which are constantly questioning and suspecting the daily activities of a nearby resident in a deep and sinister tone. Waits narrates someone who can't help but be put off by the enigmatic personal life of their neighbor, who seemingly has no kids, pets, or friends, runs a mysterious business in Indonesia, and has spent much of his time building an unknown project. Even if they can't put their finger on it, the narrator believes their neighbor is hiding a grim secret. The track ultimately portrays the unwarranted paranoia some people tend to harbor towards their neighbors. Some might just prefer keeping to themselves, while others might actually have good reason to cover their tracks. And this constant guessing is exactly what raises suspicion among those looking from the outside in. A divine proclamation of finishing the present existence is a 3-minute instrumental from the early Dutch gore grind outfit Last Days of Humanity, released in 2006. As you can expect from such a track, it is 3 minutes of intense sonic brutality, with breakneck drumming, boiling water in the form of vocals, and a gruesome cover for the listener to feast their eyes upon. Freak is a song released in 2019 by Scottish metalcore outfit Lotus Eater, formerly As Daylight Fades. The track contains piercing vocals, as well as thunderous instrumentation, and provides commentary on what life is like as a social reject or freak, and how living in such misery and isolation can lead to an unhealthy desire for power. This cycle is detailed in each of Freak's verses, going from feeling like life is stale to wanting change within a monotonous routine, and finally embracing the outcast status. Released in 2005, John Wayne Gacy Jr. by American singer-songwriter Sufjan Stevens, of course, tells the story of the serial killer himself, who was convicted of 33 murders, which took place between 1972 and 1978, and buried his victims, typically boys and young men, within or around his property after and killing them. The track is notable for taking on a rather empathetic perspective towards all individuals in Gacy Jr.'s life, including his mother, who endured domestic abuse at the hands of his alcoholic father, his victims, who had their whole lives ahead of them before their vile, untimely deaths, and, perhaps to an extent, Gacy Jr. himself. Obviously, Stevens doesn't necessarily show sympathy for the killer, but he likens himself to Gacy Jr. in how he has attempted to bury his own dark secrets beneath the earth, and he would be equally capable of committing horrible crimes if his circumstances were similar to Gacy Jr.'s. The haunting conclusion Stevens makes is that he fails to see himself as morally better than even the worst of humanity for one reason or another, as it is simply human nature to do bad things. The Place, originally titled The Cave of the Past, is a 1-minute arrangement featured on the soundtrack of the 1994 Japanese RPG Earthbound. Sonically, the song is simultaneously cryptic and unnerving, as the only resemblance of instrumentation are a series of desolate ambient noises and other quirky sounds, which rise in pitch. Williams' Mix is yet another monumental composition from experimental composer John Cage, completed in 1952. As stated by Cage, this musique concrete piece serves as a score intended to be simultaneously played on 8 overlapping magnetic tapes, truly testing the limits of the then relatively new medium. There are a total of 192 pages to Williams' Mix, and necessitates roughly 600 recordings to perform a version of the piece, with each of them divided into 6 categories by 2 of Cage's collaborators, Bebe and Louis Barron. Since being published, Williams' Mix has rarely been performed or remixed due to its complexity, with 2 known realizations being from Cage himself and, most recently, American electronic music professor Tom Erb in 2012, who also contributed to a version of the mix featured on experimental rap group Clipping's 2014 debut album, Clipping. Released in 1991 as parts of their self-titled album, Carousel by Mr. Bungle utilizes their signature coalescence of death metal and ska to deliver an eccentric track about how life, as we know it, can be seen as one big carnival. The track compares our many trivial pursuits to something out of a classic pantomime, and gradually descends from playful in tone to philosophically dreadful. In the same way Carousel depicts unnerving clowns painting on a smile, it highlights how human existence might seem like a world of joy on the surface, but contains much darker truths underneath our masquerading. Rectum is a 6-minute instrumental created by French producer and one half of Daft Punk, Thomas Bangalter, for the soundtrack to the 2002 French film Irreversible. The track itself plays during a very brutal murder scene in the movie and consists of a dark, low tonal drone which sweeps back and forth throughout its entire duration. This twisted score does so well at encapsulating the same nauseating and dreadful feeling experienced when watching Irreversible, a film notorious for being considerably gross, unsettling, and disturbing. The Death Waltz is a 2-minute instrumental produced by the duo of Tobias Lila and Christian Björklund for the 2017 adventure game Little Nightmares. The production fits the same twisted fairy tale theme as the rest of the soundtrack and game, so from an outside perspective, it serves its purpose well. With a runtime of less than 40 seconds, Beware the Friendly Stranger by the fabled IDM duo Boards of Canada is the 3rd track on their 2002 release, Geo Gaddy. The song seems unassuming on the surface, with the instrumental mostly consisting of a soft synth line and crackling noises, but very faintly, the sounds of children screaming for help can be heard in the background. Much like Geo Gaddy as a project, the contextual meaning behind this interlude is rather ambiguous. Some believe the title is a reference to an anti-drug PSA on marijuana, while others have taken it more literally and view it as a disconcerting snapshot of a kidnapping. Regardless, Beware the Friendly Stranger has emerged as a standout among listeners for its brief yet uncanny atmosphere, and in recent times is known for being the main theme to the infamous Salad Fingers web series. The Hooks is an instrumental piece produced by legendary English singer-songwriter Thom Yorke and Sam Petz Davies for the 2018 remake of the horror film Suspiria. The 3-minute track is characterized by desolate piano keys, unnerving strings, and the sounds of hooks being swung, a section inspired by the aftermath scene of Olga's brutal death, wherein the score is featured, even without taking into account the song's relations to an already disturbing scene and movie. The hooks blends meticulous musicianship and dark ambience to make for quite the haunting listening experience. Vorkuta is an album which consists of a single 45-minute track released in 2009 by Gulag, an enigmatic Dutch black noise collective. The record stands as the first of a trilogy of releases from Gulag, each named after and meant to encapsulate the experiences within some of the worst Soviet Gulag concentration camps located north of the Arctic Circle. Vorkuta itself is divided into two sides, containing 0 electric instruments and no underlying rhythm or structure whatsoever. The production contains blaring atonal violins, trumpets, and harsh noise. And perhaps most prominent are the intensely harrowing screams and cries heard throughout. To obtain such vocals, members of Gulag received permission to use inmates at a mental institution as vocalists, also including some 30 children who were patients from a youth mental asylum. This disturbing coalescence of anguished vocals, avant-garde classical composition, and free jazz instrumentation creates the most uncompromising sound collage you will ever hear. Vorkuta is a hellish 45-minute experience to the uttermost degree, evoking a sense of guilt and horror only maybe comparable to what one might imagine experiencing when viewing a snuff film. Though only an instrumental, the penultimate title track on 9 Inch Nails' The Downward Spiral is undoubtedly one of the most disturbing and emotionally heavy on the entire record. Conceptually, the song depicts the attempted of the album's protagonist, whose darker alter ego finally corrupts the last bits of humanity left within, and can be heard delivering muffled lines, detailing the bloody aftermath of the scene and justifying their actions. Trent Reznor has since stated the downward spiral and its imagery has served a cathartic purpose in his life, having experienced thoughts in the past. He faces his issues as a spectator of his own fictional demise, instead of inflicting any real-world harm to himself. The harrowing nature of this context is only heightened by the track's production, which includes nauseating screaming, dreadful drones, and a stripped-down acoustic guitar riff, replaying a motif from Closer, with everything being drowned out by heavy distortion by the end. Recorded circa 1955, No More Hot Dogs is a rockabilly song by American singer-songwriter Hassel Adkins. The track includes grainy rock and roll instrumentation as well as rather eccentric vocals from Adkins, who begins deliriously laughing before singing about decapitating his girlfriend and mounting her head on a wall so she can no longer eat more hot dogs. The incredibly bizarre subject matter was inspired by a real-life double date Adkins went on as a teen, where his friend's girlfriend asked to buy a hot dog, to which the friend gave her a look, in Adkins' words, expressing a desire to cut her head off, because they believed the girls would already have dinner before meeting and wouldn't need to spend money. Ironically, Adkins has stated No More Hot Dogs was intended for children audiences, which could either make for a ridiculously crude joke or a scarring, rude awakening. Oration of Ruin was released in 2007 by Xaster, the black metal solo project of American musician Scott Melfick Connor. First established in 1995, Xaster's music is characterized by heavily distorted guitar riffs and drums, an apocalyptic dark ambience, and incredibly anguished screams and wails from Connor, whose spiritually dark songwriting is customary within the DSBM subgenre. Oration of Ruin is one of several standouts from Xaster, as it is a prime showcase of what makes Connor's music so deeply unnerving. The self-titled outro to The Cure's 1982 gothic rock opus Pornography sees frontman Robert Smith near the final stages of his sickness, of which has plagued him with intense feelings of self-loathing, depression, and existential dread. In the words of Smith, pornography is fueled by the same self-mockery, self-hate that burned in 100 years, and similarly encapsulates a shapeless chaos, whether through the cacophony of voices in the opening moments, menacing drums and organs layered over each other to make for a dissonant, harrowing atmosphere, or Smith's utilization of diverse yet vivid imagery in glorifying the end of a troubled life. As bleak of an experience as the title track is, Smith has stated the closer actually ends on a somewhat optimistic tone, detailing the narrator's desire to eliminate their dark thoughts and search for a cure, drawing a parallel to Smith's motivation behind creating pornography and perhaps forming the Cure as a means of expressing his inner self through his art. Azazin is the name of a double LP released in 1996 by Muslim Gaz, the ethnic electronica project of late British experimental musician Bryn Jones. Like other Muslim Gaz titles, Azazin was available in extremely limited editions, with just 500 copies made upon release, and 800 from a reissue in 2004. But those who were fortunate enough to access Jones's record were rewarded with a notable stylistic departure. Azazin is Jones at his most minimalist, a significant deviation from Muslim Gaz's previous post-industrial, West Asian-influenced works, and instead consists of abstract electronics, zero percussion, and a quietly disturbing atmosphere, where futuristic elements and found sounds merge within a fully untitled tracklist. In any case, Azazin has stood the test of time as an incredibly unique album, even if its eccentricities may require an acquired taste. Composed by Yuka Tsujiyoyuk for the 2007 game Super Paper Mario, the River Twigs bed theme plays when the player traverses deep into River Twigs' waters and is followed by ghost hands. The track, though brief, is incredibly creepy for it to be featured in something as innocent as a Super Mario game, containing low-pitched reverse vocals and ominous synth lines all throughout. This entry refers to the very simple yet very creepy music box melody composed by Hans Zimmer for the 2002 supernatural horror film The Ring. The theme is also known as Samara's Song, named after the vengeful spirit from The Ring, who is behind the creation of a cursed videotape, which kills any viewer within 7 days. Why You Never Became a Dancer was released in 2003 by the English power electronics band Whitehouse as part of their album Birdseed, and in response to the short film Why I Never Became a Dancer by fellow English artist Tracy Emin. The short film, published in 1995, sees Emin recount the disillusionment she experienced while engaging in sexual relations with older men as a teen, as well as detail a time when she was publicly insulted and embarrassed by those same boys while participating in a local dance competition. Some 8 years later, Whitehouse would explicitly and aggressively accuse Emin of fabricating her entire story for personal gain, backed by a heavily distorted noise instrumental which matches frontman William Bennett's ruthless tone. City Song is the nearly 6-minute opener to the notorious 2018 opus You Won't Get What You Want, released by the American noise rock band Daughters. The song contains Daughters' signature industrious distortion and piercing bass, with drums which sound like gunshots being periodically fired right next to your ear. Frontman Alexis Marshall delivers lyrics which depict life in an apocalyptic city where a sense of nihilism has taken over, and the surrounding nature, culture, and air feel the effects of despair. City Song peaks in volume and intensity in its second half, as Marshall's disorienting screams and groans evoke paranoia in the listener, before the track abruptly ends in silence, and sees Marshall solemnly detail the harrowing aftermath of a disastrous event. Hajj, named after the annual Islamic pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca, Saudi Arabia, was released in 2019 by Liturgy, an experimental metal band fronted by American musician Haile Hunt Hendrix. The opener to Liturgy's album HAQQ, Hajj is considered to be a transcendental black metal track, and aptly so, given its explosive onslaught of tremolos and noise, as well as a melodic heaviness reminiscent of acclaimed black metal records. Bass-heavy guitars, off-putting flutes, and thunderous drums make up the 8.5-minute piece, all of which is enhanced by Hunt Hendrix's irate vocal delivery, adding on to what's already an extreme yet cathartic sonic assault of a song. Six's theme refers to one theme divided into two songs composed by Tobias Lilia for the aforementioned game Little Nightmares. Six is the name of the main protagonist of Little Nightmares and its comic series, who is a young girl in a yellow raincoat on a ghastly journey to escape the Maw. The closer to You Won't Get What You Want, Guest House, follows a frantic speaker who desperately pleads to be let into a sort of sanctuary from hostile external and internal forces. Psychologically speaking, Guest House, while somewhat ambiguous, could be interpreted as a tale of alienation masked within a horror setting. The speaker is someone who is clearly mentally unstable and could be wanting to escape from a terrifying situation which has caused them to enter a panicked state. Because of their alarming behavior, however, whoever is in the guest house is understandably hesitant to let the speaker in, leaving them stranded in permanent agony. Bassist Samuel Walker has notably stated Guest House captures as much stranger danger anxiety as tape will allow, reaffirming the song's themes of marginalization and certainly enhancing the dreadful marriage of industrial rock and harsh noise production. Pure Misanthropia refers to a 45-minute album released in 2007 by Stalag, the former alias of Gulag, derived from a Nazi concentration camp. As you can imagine, the record harrowingly encapsulates pure and utter misanthropy, capturing the moans, screams, wails, and cries of various individuals, and combining all of it with harsh metallic clanging and screeching, layered over incredibly discomforting sound effects. This oral hell is not for the faint-hearted, as it was purely made to be as oppressive and outright unlistenable as possible. The only reason to willingly sit through this I can think of is if you just want to experience misery in its most extreme form. So, if you don't, save yourself the time. Black Angels is a 20-minute avant-garde classical piece composed by the late American composer George Crumb and published in 1971. Divided into 3 groups with 13 total movements, Black Angels serves as a lament over the then ongoing Vietnam War, with rapid, high-pitched violins from its opening threnody, symbolizing American attack helicopters opening fire, and a series of other references to war having been written within the score. Crumb numerically centered Black Angels around the numbers 7 and 13, even subtitling the piece 13 Images from the Dark Land, ultimately resulting in very unorthodox instrumentation, which portrays a range of emotions in intense and haunting soundscapes. Within liner notes, Crumb has also stated Black Angels' structure represents a voyage of the soul, with its 3 groups portraying 3 stages, being the fall from grace, spiritual annihilation, and redemption. The Dark Water is a 1-minute dark ambient piece composed by the developer of the 2004 surreal horror game Yumeniki Kikiyama. The song plays when the player enters the dark, or illusionary world, a pitch-black setting with an ominous yet tranquil atmosphere, home to intricate floor designs and numerous ghosts. Primal Fear is a song released by Swedish cloud rap artist Young Lean under his side project alias of Jonathan Linduer 96 in 2016. Over walls of noise and distortion, Linduer cathartically delivers lines which utilize religious imagery while lamenting over lost love, repeating the questions, "What's your primal fear? Why am I still here?" To capture its disorienting sound, Primal Fear notably samples Dödens Landsväg from the Swedish black metal outfit Life Lover. This entry refers to the initial 4-CD set of shortwave numbers stations recordings, named the Conet Project, released in 1997 by Iridol Discs founder Akin Fernandez. The project's roots can be traced back to 1992, when Fernandez found himself drawn to his new shortwave radio and spent nights recording miscellaneous broadcasts and writing any information he could find to understand just what he was listening to. A curiosity for these Morse code blips, disembodied voices, and ambiguous numbers eventually led to the release of a 150-track set of numbers stations recordings via his label, with over 4 hours worth of material and tracks of varying lengths. Nothing about this material is disturbing in the traditional sense, but it's the vague, eerie delivery and quality of the numbers and voices, coupled with the infinite possibilities of their significance, which tends to put the listener in a dreadful trance, hypnotized by the broadcast's obscurity. In 2013, the Conet Project was reissued with an additional 5th CD for its 15-year anniversary. Do You Doubt Me, Traitor was released in 2019 by American multidisciplinary vocalist Christian Hayter under the alias of her solo project Lingua Ignota. At over 9.5 minutes, the song sees Hayter deliver loud and powerful vocals over a crowded instrumental with a piano, percussion, cello, and towering noise. Hayter evokes an unshakable dread with every wail and scream, while fearlessly addressing those who have abused or mistreated her in her life. She ensures they hold no doubt of her abilities, and portrays her wrath as akin to a god's, using diverse religious imagery. Hayter vows to destroy her abusers before being destroyed herself, even if doing so requires immense sacrifice. Smile from the Streets You Hold is the title track to the 1997 album from Red Hot Chili Peppers guitarist John Frusciante. During the project's recording process, Frusciante claimed to have been actively communicating with a spiritual realm, where much of his song ideas originated from, and it was released during a time when the guitarist was dealing with a drug addiction. In regards to the heartfelt title track, Frusciante has since stated it was an ode to an unnamed friend who passed away before his project's release. Though unconfirmed, many have speculated this friend to be the late actor River Phoenix, who was notably close with Frusciante and the rest of Red Hot Chili Peppers, had died over 3 years before the album's release, and is even posthumously featured on 2 of its tracks. Fuck Frankie is a skit from Marilyn Manson's 1995 release, Smells Like Children. The track sees Manson depicting a victim and an abuser, with the latter ordering their victim to repeatedly say, "Fuck Frankie." The Frankie constantly being referred to is Frankie Proya, who was Manson's tour manager in '94, and ran up $20,000 in expenses he couldn't explain during his Portrait of an American Family tour. Overall, I guess this is definitely one of the weirder diss tracks out there. Happiness in Slavery is the 5th track from 9 Inch Nails' 1992 EP, Broken, and is one of the band's most disturbing in more ways than one. As the title suggests, the song lyrically describes society's conformity to an oppressive system of enslavement. The narrator highlights how, instead of controlling through fear and violence, the powers that be utilize consumerist pleasures to keep society happy, amused, and compliant. This subtle system encourages individuals to believe in their supposed free will, but, as Happiness in Slavery suggests, are in for a rude awakening when they learn of their slave-like role in an incomprehensibly massive machine. Perhaps equally as infamous is Happiness in Slavery's music video, released as part of the larger Broken short film, which was nearly universally banned for depicting Bob Flanagan being violently tortured by a machine. Milkman by Aphex Twin is a standout among fans for being one of his most eccentric works, but not without a slightly uncanny feel to it. First released in 1996, the track opens with an unintelligible spoken word sample, later decoded to be an extract from the horror novel My Idea of Fun by English author Will Self. Then, a signature fast-paced electronic instrumental produced by Richard D. James plays over vocals of someone expressing their desire for a milkman to deliver them milk. A real interesting one. Another entry from power electronics band White House, A Cunt Like You, is an incredibly degrading and ear-piercing track, released in 1998, and co-produced by Bennett and Steve Albini, a 6-minute sonic assault. The song is seemingly written from the perspective of an abuser who attempts to insult their subject as viciously and explicitly as possible, shouting creatively vile remarks all throughout in an equally aggressive tone. Jordan, Minnesota is a song by American noise rock band Big Black, fronted by Albini himself, from their 1986 release Atomizer. Over breakneck punk instrumentation and through contorted vocals from Albini, the track acts out the vile sexual assault of a 5-year-old at the hands of a predator, highlighting the traumatic effects of such an interaction and the fact the incident took place in Jordan, Minnesota. Jordan's subject matter was based on a real sexual abuse scandal which unfolded within the titular city in 1985. The case saw several locals arrested and accused of sexually abusing children, though only one man named James Rudd was ultimately convicted. In recent years, Albini has stated the song might be the most embarrassing thing I've ever had to own up to, further adding, they all took at face value the preposterous accounts of an ambitious prosecutor who groomed and falsified testimony from children as young as 3 or 4. They painted a hellscape where children were regularly raped and traded between adults as sex objects. There was a round of scurrilous prosecutions, and eventually some poor son of a bitch was scapegoated off to prison. But the whole thing was a sham. None of it happened. It fit my personal pretension that all of us, all of humanity, is capable of both the most elevated and most depraved acts imaginable. If this song perpetuates the impression that these people were actually doing these things, then it's caused harm, and I'm sorry for that. There is literally no way I can make up for that. 93 Ave Blues is an instrumental piece from American post-rock band Swans' 2012 release, The Seer. The song opens with a wailing harmonica which lingers throughout, and more instruments such as a vibraphone, lap steel guitar, and screeching violins are continuously layered as the track crescendos in volume. Frontman Michael Gira can be heard deeply groaning, only adding onto the track's disconcerting ambience, before it finally explodes in noise and musical dissonance during the final moments. 93 Avenue B is the address Gira lived at with his former partner Jarbo during Swans' earliest years in New York City. The frontman has described the surrounding area as notably desolate and hostile, detailing the presence of worn-down buildings, nightly gunfire, and criminal activities such as drug dealing. Not only did this environment influence Swans' menacing no-wave sound, but it adds even more disturbing context to what is already pure nightmare fuel in oral form. Speak of the Devil, Cop is a standout from Swans' no-wave days and the title track to their 1984 release. Characterized by its slow-paced, atonal instrumentation, Cop is a vivid depiction of the psychological torment involved in police brutality. As the opening line says, the song showcases how the punishment fits the crime, not necessarily in the traditional sense, but in how the punishment at the hands of authority figures could be considered criminal in its own right under certain circumstances. There's a humiliating psychological aspect to being abused by an individual whom you are taught to trust and is meant to protect. And this cruel power dynamic relates to a larger theme of physical violation within Cop. Ultimately, Jura also bluntly explores how this cycle of embarrassment and degradation can lead to others developing a desire to pass their humiliation onto a new, potentially innocent person, like an utterly immoral pandemic. Another song from You Won't Get What You Want, The Flammable Man looks into the frantic psyche of a narrator living in paranoia, who describes experiencing sleepless nights and dealing with constant anxiety in every waking moment. As indicated by Marshall's repetition of lines and maniacal delivery, the narrator is losing control of everything in their life as a result of deep mental distress and begins to develop alarming behavior, something we see further escalate throughout the album's duration. Here's a song a lot of you wished I covered last time, but it's better late than never. Released in 1978, Hamburger Lady by industrial pioneers Throbbing Gristle is often regarded as one of the most nauseating and horrifying tracks ever conceived. Disorienting drones, a recurrent signaling horn, and disembodied wails cloud the song's instrumental. Genesis P. Orridge's vocals are chopped and robotic, delivered in such a cryptic and matter-of-fact tone and only enhancing the uncanny atmosphere. Hamburger Lady's notorious lyrical content is derived from an extract from a letter written by late sportscaster and male artist Al Ackerman. The song and extract describe an unnamed woman who was the victim of a brutal car accident and had been hospitalized after receiving extreme burns. Though she survived, the woman lived in indescribable pain, only able to sleep for no longer than 5 minutes at a stretch, and her body was completely burned from the waist up, only absorbing nutrition and hydration through tubes inserted in her legs and arms. Ackerman wrote the only other sights comparable to the woman's grotesque appearance were scenes from the Vietnam War, and even the hospital's nurses vomited from her image lingering in their heads. Because Ackerman was a male artist, it is uncertain how much of Hamburger Lady is factual and how much is fictitious, though it is known he did work in a burn center in the past. Real or not, the imagery isn't any less nauseating, and Throbbing Gristle managed to sonically encapsulate such an appalling sight in a deeply discomforting way. One of the most gut-wrenching entries, I'm Going to Do It by Giles Corey, released in 2011 under the alias of American musician Dan Barrett's acoustic side project, is the final thoughts of a narrator on the verge of killing themselves. The song relates to a prevalent theme in Giles Corey's accompanying booklet, which revolves around not only the of a person, but the literal death of self, the dissociation and loss of identity, only stemming from the deepest self-hatred, known as decontextualization. In I'm Going to Do It, the narrator also makes the grim realization of how they have ruined their lives by embodying their own self-loathing and falling victim to their own disgust. Thus, the only way to remove everything the narrator has ever hated is to remove themselves. Concubine is the opener to American hardcore band Converge's acclaimed 2001 album Jane Doe. Though on the shorter side, Converge never shy away from providing pure aggression, riveting instrumentation, and anguished screams from frontman Jacob Bannon, whose vocals aren't necessarily utilized to deliver any lyrical content, but as an additional instrument conveying the unmatched rage present throughout the entirety of Jane Doe. Another song from Boards of Canada's GeoGaddy, The Devil is in the Details, lives up to its title by obscuring a plethora of intriguing or perhaps devilish information with distorted samples and unorthodox melodies. For one, the instrumental contains a bass line and melody which are separated by an octave and major 6. The first note of this bass line is repeated 3 times, thus constantly producing 3 sixes in a row. This same riff was also deliberately designed to imitate the golden ratio in musical terms, as the bass line and melody are also roughly 1.618 seconds apart. This even foreshadows the next track, A is to B as B is to C, as its title is somewhat related to this same ratio. Tooth Taker was first released in 2020 by experimental rapper Cemetery and featured on his album Rainbow Bridge 2, with a remastered version later being featured on Rainbow Bridge 3 over 1 year later. Sampling When the Frost Comes Falling Down by Australian black metal band Woods of Desolation, Cemetery references numerous horror or horror-adjacent media such as the Poughkeepsie tapes, The Ritual, and Dexter in his twisted version of a love song, also featuring his signature slurred vocal style and dark trap production. The track's title alludes to a nickname for the narrator, who took the teeth of a woman's lover, and the song is also notable for Cemetery's rare emphasis on existentialism and melody. This itself is expected, given Cemetery has since declared Tooth Taker as his saddest track in response to a fan's question. This entry refers to a theme composed by German composer Hermann Kopp for director Jörg Buttgereit's 1987 horror movie, Necromantic. If you listen to the theme's upbeat piano melody without any context in mind, the last thing you'd assume it was intended for was an erotic cult film about a couple having a love affair with a decomposed corpse. But yeah, let's not get too into it. Released in 2022, Mudcastle is a song by American metalcore band Tala from their concept album The Generation of Danger. Though being the project's opener, the track is notable for simultaneously serving as the closer to its narrative, one which follows a Belgian scientist named Dicker Addison, who gradually loses his sanity while conducting a series of heinous human experiments. Mudcastle is set during the aftermath of Addison's experimentation, detailing the brutal deaths of his victims and his frantic run from authorities, the intensity in his pace matching the heaviness of the song's production. The title ultimately references how Addison's Mudcastle was destined to crumble because of the malice he held towards the world, and his crazed experiments had no structural integrity whatsoever. Redacted is another song from Tala and serves as the opener to their 2020 debut album Matriphagy. Like Mudcastle, Redacted is the end of Matriphagy's storyline, despite being the intro in its tracklist, with each subsequent song leading up to this moment. In a YouTube video uploaded by Tala, lead vocalist Justin Bonnets stated the cryptic 1-minute recording is of a speech from Matriphagy's main character, Kungen. The song is set immediately when police officers locate Kungen and arrive at an indescribably gruesome murder scene, where there are disembodied limbs, pools and walls of blood, torn up papers and stuffed animals, and a maniac Kungen ominously rambling in a corner. Kungen is promptly taken in for questioning, where he goes on to spend the rest of the album telling his horrific story. Full of Hell and Merzbow is a self-titled collaborative album from Japanese noise artist Merzbow and American grindcore band Full of Hell, released in 2014. What appears as an unorthodox duo on paper pairs to create an utterly devastating 23-minute experience, blending frontman Dylan Walker's penetrating low vocals and power violent production with Merzbow's signature abrasive noise, whose contributions are relatively minimal, but still enough to discomfort any listener. According to Walker, the initial sole disc of the collaborative effort is 70% Full of Hell and 30% Merzbow, with the later release of a second disc titled Sister Fawn, flipping the ratio, but both are equally as deafening. Poor You is the opener to late American lo-fi musician Daniel Johnston's 1983 album Hi, How Are You? Consisting of nothing more than an a cappella performance from Johnston. The song details his experiences with depression and ennui. The singer's days were often long and lonesome. During this period, he was isolated from the outside world and struggled to find purpose even in the simplest activities. The only source of comfort Johnston describes is a dream he frequently had at night, in which an angel caressed him while saying, poor you, no one understands you." Johnston displays a heartbreaking level of vulnerability on this minimalist song, its lyricism inspired by his lifelong struggles with mental illness. This entry refers to the main title theme for the late Pier Paolo Pasolini's 1975 horror film Salò, or The 120 Days of Sodom, released roughly 3 weeks after his murder. Composed by influential Italian composer Ennio Morricone, this theme is another one of those cases where the song definitely doesn't match the disturbing energy of its movie counterpart, but is still great in its own way. This slow jazz track has become iconic for its horrifying context, and has been used in various horror media since Salò. Attunement is a song by American experimental rap group Clipping, with contributions from the American experimental noise duo Pedestrian Deposit. Released in 2019, as part of their release, There Existed an Addiction to Blood. Over a hypnotic yet harsh instrumental, lead vocalist David Diggs depicts the ever-conflicted psyche of a speaker on the verge of The song is set as the narrator holds a noose around their neck and prepares to hang themselves, but contemplates if such a solution is truly worth following through on. The narrator goes over several reasons why they should or shouldn't proceed in the first several verses, but the fourth verse is notable for marking a permanent shift to a second-person perspective. This is seemingly the personified form of depression, overwhelming the protagonist and delivering the final nudges for them to end their life. Ultimately, attunement could also serve as commentary for the much larger societal issues of mental instability and increasing contemplation, something especially prevalent in younger, often conflicted generations. Project Misanthropia is another body of work from sonic terrorist Stalag. Released in 2007, the album completes what is seemingly a trilogy of disturbing projects from the band, and, like pure Misanthropia, is a record's worth of directionless, chaotic, oral hell. There are very brief moments of actual musicianship, such as organized guitar riffs and percussion, but the rest of this 35-minute project is made up of Stalag's trademark inhuman screams, violent metallic clangs, and deafening static, with no sense of structure or sequencing. Woe to All on the Day of My Wrath is a 15-minute opus released in 2017 by Lingua Ignota. The song speaks from the perspective of an all-powerful divine entity who is unleashing Armageddon unto the universe. This god utilizes biblical references, as well as cosmic, spiritual, and violent imagery, to measure the true power of their wrath, while backed by heavy, sludge metal adjacent distortion and a cacophony of riveting instrumentation. Woe to All's final verse makes a direct reference to Revelations chapter 6, verses 15 through 17, prophesying God pouring out his wrath on a sinful world. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? Released in 2020, Eileen Warnes by American hip-hop artist Sadistic follows the life of its titular female serial killer, a former prostitute who shot and killed 7 of her male clients before being sentenced to death in Florida. Sadistic highlights how Warnes was alienated from her peers for partaking in sex work at such an early age, along with her troubled family history and the negative influences it had on her childhood. The song makes several allusions to Warnes's homicides, of which she initially claimed were committed in self-defense against attempted derogatory nicknames she was given as a child, and her execution via lethal injection in 2002, even comparing her death to the crucifixion of Christ. Released in 1987, Beautiful Child is a standout from Swans' fifth album Children of God, and is reminiscent of their no-wave works, with a larger emphasis on harmony. Jira has since described Beautiful Child as a perverse take on the biblical story of God requesting the prophet Abraham to offer his son Isaac as a test of his devotion. Each verse follows the psyche of the narrator as they reflect on their morals and proceed with murdering the boy. The song sees the narrator embracing and expunging their darkest inner self, expressing their immediate guilt for sacrificing the child and being condemned to eternal damnation. The 10th track on Tala's Matriphagy, Cottonmouth, is set directly after Kungan murdered and cannibalized his abusive mother, Tala. Kungan clearly experiences a whirlwind of emotions following the murder. Part of him feels liberated from his mother's captivity. Part of him feels even more isolated after losing the only other human he had contact with. And part of him is still trying to fathom the ghastly scene before him. It's also in Cottonmouth where Kungan speaks with a demonic stuffed animal named Lobifu, who has been an influence to some very appalling behavior from Kungan, and later sets him free from a chain. Boil de Lune, or Moonhair in English, is a song by the French avant-garde black metal band Bansis Nocturnes, featured on their 2019 album Grand Guignol Orchestra. Sonically, the track fits the rest of the project's style as a frenzied blend of circus music and black metal, utilizing trumpets, accordions, and sinister synths, while also featuring grim DSBM vocals. Boil de Lune sounds like a piece from an orchestra of nightmares, with an absurdity to its themes and sections which is both unsettling and oddly compelling. Released in 2020, I Want You to Suffer is a song from Cindy Lee, the musical and performance project of American singer-songwriter Patrick Flegel, formerly of the alt-rock band Woman, a blend of harsh noise and psychedelia. I Want You to Suffer stands as an expression of frustration towards endured abuse, and a desire for revenge, as well as a rumination on alienation, as stated by Flegel since the track's release. The multi-instrumentalist details the pains of having to conceal oneself from a world where no one understands you, and not having anyone to trust due to a deeply rooted, poisonous framework and a history of trauma. Euthanasia is an incredibly brutal and devastating track released in 2019 by American death metal band Pissgrave. Though 4 minutes long, the song feels like an eternity of sonic brutality, consisting of heavy drumming, menacing riffs, and trademark hellish vocals. The cover art for Euthanasia's album, Posthumous Humiliation, has also generated much controversy for being a very graphic photograph of gore, showing the real human remains of what some have speculated to be either a victim of via a gunshot wound or of a vehicle collision. These grotesque artworks are a notable element in much of Pissgrave's works, as you'll see for yourself later on. 21 is obviously the 21st instrumental track from Aphex Twin's Select Ambient Works Volume 2, released in 1994. Known by fans as Spots, the song is 7 minutes of incredibly disquieting ambience, further enhanced with extreme reverberation of what sounds to be dialogue. According to James, the background audio in question is from a police interview tape with a woman who murdered her husband, adding very disturbing context to 21. It's also intriguing to see this track placed right after one of Aphex Twin's most beautiful and tranquil works in 20, or Lycan, definitely making for an extreme Whiplash Effect. Buyer's Market is a solo album from American musician and author Peter Sotos, who is notably a former member of White House. As I've mentioned in the past, Sotos is notorious for his novels pertaining to sexual violence and even being arrested on charges in 1985 after featuring such content on a cover of his zine, Pure. 7 years later came the release of Buyer's Market in 1992, a sound collage with contributions from Steve Albini, which consists of interviews with victims of child sexual abuse. The simultaneously detailed and vile accounts from the victims has led to Buyer's Market not only developing a reputation for being disturbing, but also for being an utterly repulsive listening experience on all fronts. The intro, Children, is especially horrifying, as it closes with the screams of a child begging to stay with their foster family in order to avoid going home to their father, who has an alleged history of sexual abuse. If you needed any indication of the nature of this record, there it is. Nihilism, Tied Up and Burning is a song by Gnaw Their Tongues, the black metal musical project established by Dutch multi-instrumentalist Maurice de Jong in 2004, featured on the 2007 album Reeking, Pained, and Shuddering. The track features Gnaw Their Tongues' trademark demonic vocals and atmosphere, one developed from blasting bass and drums, along with all-encompassing wrenched riffs, which enshroud the listener in an absolute hellscape. As the song's title suggests, this is 6 minutes of the heaviest dread imaginable, so listen at your own discretion. All the Children Are Dead is a 9-minute track by Venetian Snares, the musical project of Canadian electronic producer Aaron Funk, released in 2001. The song is certainly on the more convoluted, ear-piercing, and even disturbing side of breakcore music, as through explosive electronics, Venetian Snares samples an interview from the paranormal-themed radio talk show Coast to Coast AM. The sample sees a caller harrowingly describe the mass murder of children, which he alleged took place in a small town in Ohio and has since been covered up by authorities, with the song's title derived from a blunt line from this segment stating, "All the children are dead." Excavation of NC Station was released in 2007 by American death metal band Cephalotripsy. The song is about as ruthless and inhuman as you can expect from a brutal death metal record, only made even more horrifying paired with the gruesome artwork of its respective album. Excavation of NC Station is characterized by pounding drums from the band's former drummer Forrest Stead and the generally slow-burning yet methodical approach Cephalotripsy takes on many of their works. Side note, the band's name is derived from a method of removing a stillborn fetus from the womb by crushing its skull. Project Terror is another record from Stalag's trilogy From Hell. Released in 2004, the instrumentation is relatively versatile compared to some of the band's other works, but still includes your usual deeply disturbing mix of ear-piercing ringing, distorted guitar strumming, and demonic howls and screams from the album's vocalists. Notably, Stalag has since stated one of its members was nearly strangled to death by a mental patient during the recording of Project Terror, and you can even hear the sounds of them being choked in the background. Beyond is an extreme harsh noise track from Japanese collective Hijo Kaidan, Japanese for Emergency Staircase, featured on their 1986 album, Tapes. This is undoubtedly one of the loudest and most terrifying noise records of its time, taking up nearly 12 minutes with distorted, high-pitched feedback, demented screaming, and electric guitars from hell. Beyond is further characterized by its noticeable free improvisation, which is a signature element of Heijo Kaidan's early style, and would prove to be a seminal quality to the realm of noise music. Directly following A Cunt Like You is Dado, the fourth track from Whitehouse's 1998 album Mummy and Daddy, and one which focuses on a young girl being raised by her own father from his perspective. The songwriting is incredibly vulgar and dehumanizing, as you'd expect, and the father even attempts to justify the act in a very pedophilic manner. Instrumentally, this track is pure hell. There is so much deafening feedback and distortion, and Bennett's vocals are so discombobulated, the lyrics would be indiscernible if it wasn't for him directly yelling them into your ears. I've Plumbed This Whole Neighborhood by British outfit Nurse with Wound was released circa 1986 and stands out as one of the band's most haunting works in their discography. The song contains sirens wailing, industrious feedback and instrumentation, and robotic vocals, delivered over truly apocalyptic production with no sense of direction. Above all else, this song is nightmare fuel, and is more likely than not to leave you petrified upon listening. Project Nile completes Stalag's trilogy and was the first of the bunch to be released back in 2003. At 34 minutes long, the album is another deliberate attempt to discomfort, utilizing deep sinister noise, drones, and dark ambience to do so. Again, the vocals allegedly came from the screams of mental asylum patients and victims, with the band since stating one of the vocalists was an inmate who fatally stabbed his mother at 16 for allowing him to be sexually abused by his uncle for years. Simply because of Stalag's anonymity, there is no evidence confirming or denying any of their stories, but the music itself is some of the most ghastly I've heard regardless. Mary Turner by American experimental rock outfit Shoo Shoo is the 7th track from their 2019 release Girl with Basket of Fruit. Through muffled yet frantic delivery and backed by an apocalyptic electronic instrumental, lead vocalist Jamie Stewart details the horrifying lynchings of African-American couple Mary and Hazel Hayes Turner, occurring during the May 1918 lynchings in southern Georgia. Hazel was first to be murdered by a lynch mob after being accused of a murder he did not commit. Distraught by his death, Hazel's wife Mary called out the mob and threatened legal action. Instead of achieving justice, however, she unfortunately became the victim of an indescribably vile lynching herself. The 8-month pregnant mother of 3 was soon captured by the same mob of hundreds at Folsom Bridge. There, Mary was hung upside down by her ankles, soaked in gasoline, and burned alive. While engulfed in flames, Mary's stomach was cut open with a knife, and from her womb dropped her unborn child, who cried in the dirt before having their skull crushed by a mob member. As if the mob hadn't already done enough, they shot Mary's body roughly 100 times before finally burying her and her unborn child next to the tree at which she was lynched. The deaths of the Turners are just one of countless cases of heinous lynching rampages, which took place between 1880 and 1930 in the American South, an absolutely disgusting era in American history. A is to B as B is to C by Boards of Canada immediately follows The Devil is in the Details and contains equally cryptic and creepy samples with largely ambiguous meanings. Within less than 2 minutes, the track goes from using a reversed sample from an interview with late American murderer Tommy Silverstein, to sampling an innocent children's song, and then to sampling a variety of other older films, obscuring their messagings by playing them in reverse or using other sound effects. Like much of GeoGaddy, somehow this song is simultaneously all over the place and deeply meticulous, attempting to evoke a sense of surrealism in the listener they can never quite put their finger on. Select Your Drone is a song by Canadian post-punk band Preoccupations from their debut LP, Cassettes, released in 2013 while they were still known as Viet Cong. The track actually starts off relatively tame in sound for 2 or so minutes, but then descends into a frightening atmosphere of industrious noise, frantic pacing, and desolate echoes and yells throughout the remaining duration. Tokyo Anal Dynamite by the Ghetto Geri Gege Did I Do Better This Time is the title track from the Japanese experimental outfit's 75-track live album released in 1990. Like many Ghetto Geri Gege standouts, the song is incredibly brief, at less than 30 seconds in length, but is compacted with a profound amount of deafening noise in the form of ear-piercing feedback and unmatched screaming from frontman Juntaro Yamanouchi. Rectum Grinder is a 35-second song released in 2000 by American grindcore veterans Intestinal Disgorge. Though containing not much more than demonic screaming and a heavy instrumental, the track also does showcase some rather impressive vocal range and guitar play for its short runtime. In Heaven is a song recorded in the late 1970s by American harmonicist and songwriter Peter Ives, who co-wrote the track along with the late David Lynch for his 1977 film Eraserhead, also known as the Lady in the Radiator song for Laurel Near's famed performance. The track is a fan favorite for being part of a brief yet ethereal moment in an otherwise haunting viewing experience, and has since been covered by the likes of Devo, the Pixies, and even The Weeknd. Au Clair de la Lune is a French folk song originating in the 18th century with an unknown composer and lyricist. What makes this tune truly notable is its distinction for being the first ever recording of music in history. In 1860, French inventor Edouard Léon Scott de Martinville, forgive me for butchering his name, used his invention of the phonautograph to produce a 20-second recording of what is believed to be himself slowly singing the folk song's first lines of its second stanza. This was done by transcribing sound waves as undulations traced on a smoke-blackened solid surface, creating visual images for a sound which Scott hoped could be read by humans as one would read text. The excerpt has since been revived by 21st Century Remasterers and was recognized by Guinness World Records as the first recognizable human voice recording. This century refers to a remix of Duvet by the English rock band Boa, which is the main theme of the 1998 sci-fi anime series Serial Experiments Lane by electronic producer Gorshit. Basically, Duvet is layered under extremely harsh noise and distortion for roughly 2 minutes. There's not much more to it. Massacre of the Troop is a song featured on the soundtrack to the highly controversial 1980 Italian horror film Cannibal Holocaust, composed by late Italian composer Ritz Ottolani. The track is notable for its use of mesmerizing yet haunting synths and hellish strings, adding an even more disturbing feel to what is already a, scarring viewing experience. If you know, you know. The Man in the Hat is another instrumental theme composed by Tobias Lilia from the 2021 horror video game Little Nightmares 2. The track stands as the main theme for The Thin Man, the game's main antagonist, who appears as a slender and crooked being with a grayscale noir-style attire. The fifth track from Shoo Shoo's 2004 release, Fabulous Muscles, Support Our Troops O, critiques America's foreign policy in war-torn nations and how soldiers justify the merciless slaughter of the innocent in the name of national security. Each of Stewart's spoken word verses are delivered in a matter-of-fact yet agitated tone, and are placed between harsh noise instrumentation reflecting the anger in the track's lyricism. Stewart first describes the brutal death of a 4-year-old girl at the hands of a soldier, while highlighting the unintelligence and ignorance displayed by the soldier for resorting to war crimes as an outlet for their inner rage. Then Stewart asserts many members of the military care less about defending civilians and more about the sadistic, vile pleasures of murdering foreigners, before finally asking one question: for all the atrocities you've committed, why should I care if you get killed? The Great Hen Yuan River is a song by Ukrainian darkwave outfit Kukor Bila Smrt, featured on their 1991 album Manira Muzika, though containing a melancholic instrumental with desolate vocals. The track actually contains a beautiful performance from lead vocalist Svitlana Nyanyo, whose high-pitched falsetto is able to place the listener in a trance as they float through an ethereal, almost gothic atmosphere. Directly following Beware the Friendly Stranger is the equally eerie electronic instrumental track Gyroscope, a Boards of Canada standout, which founding member Marcus Owen stated is a near-exact replica of a song he heard in a dream. I dreamed the sound of it, and although I've recreated dreamt songs before, I managed to do that one so quickly that the end result was 99% like my dream. It spooks me to listen to it now. Gyroscope is certainly one of Boards of Canada's most uncanny works, containing haunting synths, fast-paced drums, and a recording of E05 Cynthia, a number station operated by the CIA used to broadcast messages to intelligence officers in foreign nations. Featured on their 2003 release A Promise, Black Spice Shoo Shoo is undoubtedly one of the band's most personal works, as it details some of the final words and confessions from Jamie Stewart's father before committing suicide months before the album's release. While doing commentary for the track, Stewart has stated every lyric on Blacks, save the first line, is something their father has directly said to them before his death. The songwriting depicts a total loss of motivation, a common symptom in those experiencing depression. Stewart's father has given up on trying to be happy, and eventually admits his intention to kill himself to them. As for why the track is titled Blacks, most Shoo Shoo records with black in their title relate to Stewart's family or family in general to some extent, as evident in other songs such as Black Drum Machine or Black Keyboard. The closer to Pissgrave's posthumous humiliation, Rusted Wind is notable for being one of Pissgrave's most sonically expansive works. The track begins with their signature breakneck death metal pace and heaviness, but by the second half, there's a notable shift to a slower, more melodic sound, elevated with isolated guitar play and deep, hellish growls. Rusted Wind is beloved among fans, for its latter half in particular, widely regarded as one of the most emotional moments in an otherwise brutal discography. Hellraiser is a song by American avant-garde band Naked City, first featured on their 1990 album Torture Garden. At less than a minute in length, Hellraiser contains Naked City's signature juxtaposition of diverse elements from free jazz, grindcore, and thrash, among other genres, performed at breakneck speed. Screams from Japanese vocalist Yamataka Ai further add to Hellraiser's hardcore soundscape, and the song has famously been featured in the soundtrack to Michael Haneke's disturbing 1997 horror film Funny Games, and its 2007 remake. Body Betrays Itself is the third track from the 2014 album Bestial Burden by Pharmakin, the Brooklyn-based experimental music project from musician Margaret Chardiet. The main inspiration for Body Betrays Itself and the rest of the record was an emergency surgery Chardiet had in 2013. During the recovery process, Chardiet felt a disconnect with her mind and physical body, which caused her to reflect on the process of her body's inevitable disintegration. Body Betrays Itself encapsulates Chardiet's grueling struggle with her own mortality in sonic form. utilizing industrious screeching and distortion, ominous loops which creates a claustrophobic soundscape, and anguished screams from Shardayat herself. Instead of reaching any specific destination, the music gradually falls apart like a withered body succumbing to its old age. Released in 2012, I Love Abortion by Shushu was inspired by a time when a friend of Stewart's had an abortion because she was personally unready to be a proper parent to a child. The lyrics are based on a series of emails exchanged between the two regarding the topic, and follow the speaker as they attempt to console themselves during the procedure, ultimately arguing their baby deserves more in life than what they can offer, and they're simply unable to truly fulfill the role of a parent. Stewart has since elaborated on the track's context, including the real-world symbolism behind certain lines, as well as its political significance. A young friend of mine had gone through a long period of cutting herself, which we discussed over the course of 2 years. Not long after this, she became pregnant and came to know that she was not able to be, at this time, the kind of mother she knew a child deserved. She decided to, after deep and fraught consideration, abort the baby. She did this out of love. She named the zygote Little Jizzo. The lyrics come out of admiration for her, the crushing mix of sadness and correct relief that abortion can create, and out of White Dwarf hot anger towards the US right wing. As the topic elicits such crazed violence in conservatives, the only response seems to be to meet it with as much unhinged rage. Silence 011010701 is a 5-minute instrumental piece by Canadian progressive metal outfit Unexpect, released in 2006 as part of their album In a Flesh Aquarium. The track contains numerous avant-garde sections, with a general mix of industrial and electronic production, and stands out for its relatively unorthodox instrumentation. Venereology is the name of an album released by Merzbow in 1994, and is notable for being the noise musician's take on a death metal or grindcore sound, further inspired by the macabre photographs of J.P. Whitkin and the wicked writings of J.G. Ballard. Venereology is rhythmically slower yet heavier than Merzbow's prior works, and is so loud in volume. Tracks such as I Lead You Towards the Glorious Times exceed American limitations on the dynamic range allowed on CDs. Merzbow intentionally produced Venereology while under the influence of alcohol to capture an authentically dirty sound through harsh noise, and the project generally contains a ghastly atmosphere, as depicted in its artwork, and the coalescence of death metal instrumentation and overwhelming distortion. Thanks to being released by the American heavy metal label Relapse Records, Venereology, along with the succeeding album Pulse Demon, largely contributed to Japanese noise music's rise in popularity among Western audiences. Blind Date is the name of a performance art piece, of which was accompanied with an album, carried out in 1980 by American artist John Duncan. At the time, Duncan had been dealing with a deeply personal breakup and was mentally devastated, believing he had failed at a fundamental part of being human, which was to love. Duncan believed the only way he could find closure was to physically and psychologically punish himself as thoroughly as possible, having associated male sexuality with aggression, abjection, and death. The artist had a befitting idea for his punishment. He wished for, quote, "my last potent seed to be spent in a dead body." And Duncan stood by his word. He coordinated with a mortician's assistant in a Mexican border town to host a session wherein he would have sex with a female corpse. The act was initially planned to be videotaped, but because cameras were forbidden at the morgue, Duncan instead presented his performance as an audio-only event to an audience in a darkened warehouse, and was soon released in record form. In addition to the necrophilia, Duncan then carried out a vasectomy procedure and photographed this act as it happened. Though shown afterwards, both acts were done in private to align with Duncan's artistic vision, to highlight the impossibility of visualizing abject masculinity in the context of Patriarchy. You Thought What You Saw Was It is a song featuring Earth Eater by American hardcore punk band Show Me the Body, released in 2017 as part of their album Corpus One, composed of a barren, atonal instrumental. The track sees frontman Julian Cashwat Pratt and Earth Eater interchangeably deliver lines while torturously screaming for 2.5 minutes. Boiled Angel is a song by the anonymous British extreme metal band Dragged Into Sunlight, featured on their 2009 project Hatred for Mankind. The track opens with dialogue between American serial killer Maury Travis and an unnamed female victim, who is forced to call him the Master. Also included are samples of cult leader Charles Manson, first from his 1987 interview on The Today Show, and then from a speech the cult leader gave to his followers during his trial, both of which are placed over blackened death metal instrumentation. At this point, I think Nurse with Wound produces music directly from the realm of nightmares. The song Several Odd Moments Prior to Lunch is a nearly 10-minute dark ambient instrumental released in 1984. The track is composed of what seems to be heavily slowed and reverberated vocals, ominous chanting, and dissociative distortion, among other sound effects, which all come together to sound like something out of an acid trip through hell. Manual penectomy, named after the surgical procedure involving the full removal of the penis, is the name of a Gore Noise album split between HAS and Bodily Wastes, released in 2010. Look, we're at the point of the iceberg where the disturbing aspects just speak for themselves sometimes. Just one look at this project's tracklist will tell you all you need to know about its sound. This is just your usual grindcore hellscape, and I'm pretty sure there's still more of it to cover, so let's get on with it. Lindsay Escapes is a horrifying composition by Australian composer Patrick Savage, who worked with French composer Oleg Spies on the score for the infamous 2009 horror film The Human Centipede. I think if you made it this far, you're obviously fucked up enough to know of The Human Centipede, so I'm gonna save myself from the mental trouble of explaining it. The piece itself is undoubtedly discomforting, containing several ear-piercing moments and a generally haunting soundscape. Baneful Abortion of the Cosmic Fetus is a single released in 2014 by death metal act Tetragrammicide. The track has a quiet beginning, but then violently explodes in sound, blending black noise with metal instrumentation, while backed by deep, low-quality growls as vocals. The chaos peaks by the song's latter half, until the noise eventually decrescendos by the end. Jonestown is a song released in 1980 by American industrial rock pioneers Chrome. The track makes allusions to, and is named after, Jonestown, a remote settlement in Guyana established by the People's Temple under the command of the cult's leader, Jim Jones. Jonestown has a very foreboding atmosphere, fitting for its grim context, and sees vocalist Damon Edge deliver lines in desolate whispers over a disorienting instrumental. Sonically, the song is arguably ahead of its time, capturing an eerie post-punk sound, which later, more mainstream outfits would attempt to obtain. This entry refers to a cassette release titled Tongue Removal from 2016 by Gore Noise outfit Dissolved, one of many aliases belonging to musician Bobby Maggard, with a photo of Gore as the cover and an entirely untitled track list. The tape is full of breakneck drumming and guitar play, further enhanced with very freakish screaming from Maggard. Another entry from Last Days of Humanity, Hematopoietic System Tissue and Lymphoid Fail, released in 2021, illustrates the internal and external disintegration of the human body in meticulously horrifying fashion. The track certainly lives up to its title in describing the resulting pains of the hematopoietic system's collapse, with imagery matched in intensity by sinister riffs and demonic screaming. Battery Ergibet is a 16-minute piece by American drone metal band Sun O, featured on their 2005 album Black One. The track's title acknowledges two of its inspirations in the form of a double entendre. The song was recorded as a tribute to Korthon of the black metal band Bathory, even sonically based on an extremely slowed down riff from A Fine Day to Die. And the full name of Bathory Erzsébet belongs to a 16th century Hungarian noblewoman who was accused of torturing and murdering hundreds of women with her cohorts, earning the nickname the Bloody Countess. As for vocals, Sun O enhances Black One's black metal sound by recruiting Melfic of Zasther, allegedly going as far as to lock the claustrophobic vocalist in a casket while recording the track. In the project's official track listing, Melfic is even credited in Bathory Erzsébet for his calls from beyond the grave. Dead Slave Dump is the second track from Occult of Slave Whores by Semen-Drenched Slave of the Devil, released in 2009. As you might expect, this song is 5 minutes of the most satanic and hellish black metal conceivable. The instrumentation, consisting of drum machines, electric guitar, and loud ambience, is heavily distorted and layered with screaming and sex noises all throughout. Bestial Burden is the 7-minute title track to Pharmacone's 2014 release. Over a barren and distorted electronic instrumental, Shardayat maniacally yells out lyrics, a la a suicide track, which further explore the inner conflicts experienced by the singer as she felt a widening divide between her physical and mental self. While bedridden after an abrupt organ resection, Shardayat began to think of her body anthropomorphically, believing it to possess an intent of its own and an inexplicable urge to sabotage. Bestial Burden orally depicts this entire experience, evoking a lingering sense of discomfort before ultimately crescendoing in noise and dissonance by the end. Spectrum Ripper is a 25-part sound collage released in 1996 by Japanese extreme noise artist Maso Yamazaki under the moniker Masona. Each song varies in length, but is typically between 1 to 2 minutes long, and contains incredibly harsh screeching, feedback, and frequencies, as well as freakish screams from Yamazaki himself. This is a project I actually remember randomly listening to, and I was caught off guard, to say the least. Here's a very interesting entry. In 2013, a neurologist at Stanford Medical Center named Joseph Parvizi was at a Kronos Quartet concert when the outfit began playing melodies based on radio signals from outer space. Bewildered by what he heard, Parvizi suddenly had an idea to utilize such musification in his own field. He wondered what the human brain's electrical activity during a seizure sounded like in musical form. Fortunately for Parvizi, he had a connection in Stanford music professor Chris Schaaf, an expert in converting natural signals into music in his own right, to help him on his project. To begin, Parvizi placed electrodes in consenting patients' brains to create electroencephalograms, or EEG, recordings of normal brain activity and a seizure state. Parvizi then shared the patient's EEG data with Schaaf, who set the electrical spikes of firing neurons to music. Schaaf used a tone resembling a human voice as a means of providing the listener with a more intuitive understanding of the neural activity. The final product details the 3 main phases of a seizure, being prodrome and aura, ictal, and post-ictal, and is not only an innovative work in the realm of sound, but could serve as a blueprint for the creation of a biofeedback tool used to identify brain patterns associated with seizures. The title track of Whitehouse's 2003 album Birdseed isn't necessarily a song, but a 14-minute compilation of testimonies from victims of sexual assault, as well as mothers of abused and murdered children. As you can imagine, this is by far one of the most disturbing spoken word pieces out there, on par with much of Peter Sodos's solo works. Futuristic Computer Sex was released in 2017 by digital noise producer Venta Protesics. Upon listening, you'll find out this track is just 3 minutes of deafening extreme noise, composed by Venta Protesics as a means of achieving his one true goal of designing sounds with the specific single-minded purpose of generating physical distress in his listeners. It's in My Blood is the 5th track from industrial outfit Coil's acclaimed 2005 album The Ape of Naples. The song consists of an indescribably dreadful instrumental, full of distortion, glitches, and musique concrete instrumentation. The only vocals are screams and moans, as well as the reiteration of the line, "It's in my bloodstream." Though ambiguous, the lyric could specifically be referencing alcoholism, given co-founder John Balance's personal issues with alcohol, and the drunken delivery of the vocals, though the same can also be applied to just about any other toxic substance. Kenworth is the penultimate track from the 2003 album GR by Deathpile, the power electronics project of musician Jonathan Kanadi. Like the rest of GR, Kenworth examines the twisted psyche of American serial killer Gary Ridgway, while also depicting his crimes in disturbing lyrical fashion. Named after a truck factory Ridgway worked at, the song is written from the perspective of a woman who details her uncomfortable encounters with the killer, all while backed by an unrelenting harsh noise instrumental and delivered through brash vocals from Kanadi. Neat Neat is a song by Baram 1 featured on the soundtrack to a 1998 Japanese erotic splatter horror film titled Tumbling Doll of Flesh. The movie itself is notorious for its incredibly gory imagery and depictions of extreme BDSM and with a soundtrack which mirrors its off-putting atmosphere. From what I gathered, this song was once very hard to access, and is still relatively obscure to this day. Crimson Halo is a 2.5-minute track released in 2020 by Methwitch, the experimental metal project of American musician Cameron McBride. Backed by a visceral deathcore instrumental, Crimson Halo follows a speaker who is being endlessly tormented by demons. The speaker describes losing their sanity and descending into a hallucinatory chaos, as they even see walls melt like candle wax. When their suffering becomes unbearable, the speaker attempts to take their life by shooting themselves. But like a twisted joke, the demons revive them from the dead and force them to repeatedly commit over and over again. Consciousness is Nature's Nightmare is a 10-minute song released in 2016 by Jude Geit, the solo project of multi-instrumentalist and musician Adam Kalmbach. With clear microtonal black metal roots, the track is an absolute roller coaster of unremittingly harsh instrumentation, sometimes producing atonal soundscapes, with guttural yet sensational vocals from Geit. Like the rest of the album Per Durance, Consciousness is Nature's Nightmare explores concepts relating to nature and mortality, and is a standout for its uniquely sinister yet complex display of musicianship. Released in 2003, The Dark Bleeding is a black noise EP by obscure English outfit Emmet, widely regarded as one of the most unsettling black metal adjacent releases in relatively recent memory. The EP largely consists of heavy distortion and dissonant, uncanny ambience, drowned in reverberation. Though some tracks are certainly more brash than others, The Dark Bleeding's general soundscape was seemingly crafted with the sole intent of disturbing the listener, whether through drawn-out electric guitar feedback, harsh noise, or sonic jump scares as a song goes from barren too explosive. Weeping is the sixth song from Throbbing Gristle's 1978 album DOA, The Third and Final Report. According to co-founding member Kosi Fanny Tootie, the track was lyrically inspired by the fallout of a relationship between herself and Genesis P. Orridge, who speaks on their intoxicating dynamic and the mental strain they endured during their conflicts. Genesis says they no longer want to live because of the split near the end of the song, referring to a time when they swallowed an extreme amount of antidepressants in a suicide attempt and was promptly hospitalized. On another tragic note, Weeping is also believed to be one of the last songs Ian Curtis of Joy Division listened to before committing suicide. According to Genesis, Curtis called the vocalist and began singing Weeping in a similarly solemn tone the night before his death. Concerned, Genesis attempted to call anyone close to Curtis to ask for context afterwards, but unfortunately, Curtis was found dead the next day. Goat Ritual is the name of a 12-minute demo tape released in 2004 by black metal outfit Antichrist. The demo is characterized by its satanic themes and imagery, as well as its incredibly absurd, dehumanizing vocals and overwhelming noise. There's even a cover of Mayhem's Death Crush as the outro, and, well, it's certainly one of the covers of all time. Pray For Me is a song released in 2014 by Japanese noise rock outfit Enden. The track starts off disquieting, but largely unassuming. However, after the first minute or so of off-tune screaming, comes an explosion of avant-garde noise and dissonance. It's like the song's instrumental just starts violently vomiting, and all of the contents is just chaos and vocals from hell, horrifically mixed together. Phantasmagoria is a 46-minute piece composed in 1992 by Japanese noise collective CCCC, named after John C. Lilly's hierarchical group of cosmic entities, the Cosmic Coincidence Control Center. As you can imagine, the track takes a very cathartic approach to producing noise, and is so deafening. Its volume is on par with extreme power electronic works. The harsh noise noticeably grows louder over time, as ecstatic distortion and psychedelic intensity are fully displayed. To summarize this entry, an American named Nicholas Bate Stoutzenberger recorded some shitty acoustic demos in the past wherein he talks about the likes of and admits to being a pedophile and in 2015, Bate was charged with sexual assault committed against a child and is now, thankfully, rotting in prison. Black Light Aeon Apocryphia is a 17-minute track released in 2012 by the Norwegian one-man band Utarm. The song is characterized by its experimental black metal sound and lack of direction, instead being an all-encompassing hellscape with no moment to rest. The instrumental largely consists of heavily overdriven guitar melodies and low-end tremolo drones, and is accompanied by distorted and occasionally freakish screaming and singing from Utarm. Asleep on an Airplane is an instrumental track produced by the American electronic trio of Death's Dynamic Shroud, released in 2014. A showcase of the outfit's signature vaporwave sound, Asleep on an Airplane is driven by a rather menacing sample of the theme song to The Gumby Show from 1967. The track is just one of countless examples of how Death's Dynamic Shroud is able to utilize all sorts of material to create intriguing and often unique soundscapes. What I believe is Gorgonzola in English is a song by Brazilian outfit Daleta, released as part of their 2021 album 333 Mutilation Methods. This one is a brief 30-second grindcore track, with freakish screaming and a bit of industrial production mixed with it. It sounds as off-putting as you'd imagine, and there's not much else to it. Practice of Hygiene is a song by Berlin-based Chinese artist Pan Daijing, featured on her 2017 album Lack. The track is driven by a series of avant-garde elements, as it begins with a spoken word segment followed by discomforting moans, an unorthodox flute, and a low piano chord struck periodically. This uncanny atmosphere is occasionally interrupted with more lines from Daijing, who also seems to provide the most unsettling ASMR you can imagine, and continues for the rest of the song's nearly 5-minute duration. Caustic RNA Transmogrification is a song by avant-garde death metal outfit Effluence from their 2021 release, Psychocephalic Spawning. This intro track sets the tone for a grueling album experience, not only including very menacing growls, squeals, and chaotic dissonance, but also showcasing the band's impressive technicality, whether through hypnotizing drums or eccentric guitar play. All of the above comes together to create what is very much a hellscape, with music meant to both astonish and frighten through a bombardment of beastly noise. Licking the Fig Tree is the 5th track from the 2019 album 7 Horses for 7 Kings by Black to Calm, the solo project of German sound artist Mark Richter. A discomforting dark ambient piece, Licking the Fig Tree utilizes the desolate squeals of a saxophone against a lingering drone and crashes of cymbals to make for a slow-burning, haunting soundscape. The track carries with it an atmospheric eeriness, enough to place the listener in a trance, but one where they're always on edge over the suggestions of danger. Licking the Fig Tree is just one of several notable displays of sound designing from Richter, as he gives darkness a uniquely majestic form and makes for a rewarding listen. Another power electronics track from Deathpile's GR, Addicted, horrifyingly details an interaction between serial killer Gary Ridgway and an unnamed prostitute, one based on the real crimes he committed during the 1980s. The song begins from the perspective of Ridgway, who immediately confesses to being addicted to prostitutes and making sex his source of pleasure for roughly a decade. Immediately afterwards, however, we see Ridgway's mood change from lustful to purely hateful, while also being disgusted by himself for having sex. He's mostly disgusted by the prostitutes he paid for, calling them whores, and expressing his desire to strangle every last female sex worker to death. Then the track shifts to the perspective of a female victim, a sex worker who immediately recognized Ridgway's intentions were beyond lustful, and grew suspicious when he asked her to go to the woods. The victim then says Ridgway tackled her to the ground and started choking her, but she was able to turn around and narrowly escape his grasp. Despite surviving, the sex worker would spend years feeling paranoid after the incident, believing Ridgway never stopped hunting for her. The song closes with one final, chilling message from GR. She got lucky, but I learned. I fucking learned. And so did the world. The final entry of this iceberg is Necrosadism by Sutcliffe Jugend, a track released in 1982 by the duo of Paul Taylor and Kevin Tompkins, who collaborated to form a sub-project from Whitehouse. The 8-minute power electronics piece immediately establishes a relentless and vilifying environment through ear-piercing ringing and anguished screams from Tompkins. These two brutal components linger for the entire duration and are also enhanced by harsh feedback and screeches, resulting in some very unpleasant dissonance. This has been Zen. Take care.